Okay, can you hear us now? I'm assuming they can hear us now. It just got us. Okay, here we go. Raised hand. Okay, all these people raised their hand, so I'm assuming they probably couldn't hear us.
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
So if you have raised your hand because you could no longer hear us, if you could lower your hand to indicate that you can hear us now, that would be much appreciated. And staff will look to make sure the hands are lowering.
Hands are all down.
So, yeah, okay. Carl, we're gonna do public comment after the presentation. Are you raising your hand to give public comment?
Hands back down.
Okay, great, wonderful. All right. I apologize that you could not hear the audio. Shall we proceed? Would you, I mean, they had the slides.
I'd recommend proceeding.
Okay.
The presentation
No problem.
was also in written form.
Okay,
And so the key piece is after the presentation.
okay, great. Great, wonderful. Thank you, and thank you to the public who let us know that they could not hear us. Okay, we'll proceed. Apologies.
Okay, I think this is it on data requirements. Okay, so the next category is safety requirements. So the safety requirements are really looking to prioritize the safety of people using the sidewalks or the bike lanes, driving on our streets. And some things that we've added are minimizing the amount of time that the devices are stopping on a curb ramp, so they're not blocking the way of people getting onto there, minimizing the time that they're stopping at push buttons too. And then reducing speed limit to or limiting it to the pace of the pedestrians or cyclists that they're around. So if someone stopped on the sidewalk, they'll have to stop. If they're walking, they'll have to be at a similar pace. And then just a few additional items. So clarifying where the devices are allowed to operate. So they're not allowed to operate on trails. And then requiring geofencing capabilities that can be updated. So modifying where the devices can go and making sure that there is, if they are fully autonomous and get past that point of having the human handler, they know where to stop and which routes to take. And then aligning with city policies, they would have to get a mobile vending permit, aligning with the active transportation plan. And for devices operating within the bike lanes, they'd have to follow the California Vehicle Code too. In terms of contractual process, the companies would have to get the mobile vending permit and then enter into a contract with the city. And this is how it was done before too. The contract would just include the updated guidelines and our standard, the city's standard insurance requirements. And then any companies found not in compliance with either the permit or the agreement, permit would be revoked. So in terms of next steps, so we are looking to formalize a personal delivery device program. We're asking right now for feedback on what's being presented and within the memorandum. And then we can incorporate any feedback and comments into the updated guidelines and potentially take this back to the full city council for consideration this fall. And so, yeah, with that, I can welcome any questions.
Thank you. Committee members have questions.
And I should start this off by saying I have a lot of questions and a lot of suspicions. When Starship was operating, they were operating around where I live, and I had frankly a lot of problems with them. So, but I'm not against, I'm not against delivery or even delivery robots. I just want this to be done right. So I do have a lot of questions. So first you said there were some companies inquiring. How many companies is that?
Had 4.
Yes, we've had 4, and prior to that, we had 2 additional that have no longer decided to.
4 plus 2 that are, and among them, how many were more sidewalk oriented, how many more bikeway oriented, and how many more roadway oriented or but that's, you can tell me that too.
Yeah, I think it's a combination and it seems that these companies are heading towards going into bicycle and travel lane. But
By
but
travel
they-
lane, you mean road or,
Yeah.
oh, okay.
But I believe that most of them do both.
Road and road.
But yeah, do sidewalk and bike.
Most of them do sidewalk and bike, so unlike the ones here that are like the ones pictured. Side, okay. Just wanna, and then there's a lot of talk right now about e-cargo bikes. Have you gotten any, like they're being set up in New York, it's all over the news. Have you had any inquiries from them?
No, we haven't.
Those are with e-cargo bikes, you know, they're with people. Okay, and then how much is this? Is this considered a pilot program or a program?
So the
Or we decide?
yeah,
Or something else?
the program from 2018 and 2020 were both considered pilot. In making these changes, we're looking to create a program out of it. But it is up to.
And then how much have you interfaced? How much has this been? I don't know how siloed it is. Certainly there are staff from multiple different places here, but how much has the planning work gone through economic vitality or economic development? How much of it is interfaced with the active transportation plan?
Well, yeah, I will pass that question over to John.
So these conversations have been going on for the better part of a year and a half. So we have engaged both with our Public Works Transportation team. We've engaged with our police department. We've engaged with our planning team. And then we certainly have been very cognizant of what I would say is the first experience with Starship. There was a lot of learning that went on as a result of that. And so a lot of the augmentations and additions that are being proposed are direct learnings from that. And then beyond that, we have been engaging with other communities that do have fairly active programs. See a lot more of these programs in Southern California and learning from staff down there about best practices. So internally, we've been coordinating across the various departments and divisions that generally touch the space. We've done some best practice research, and then we've been vetting these ideas both through the downtown committee and the bicycle pedestrian advisory committee as well to garner their insights and feedback.
And what are the cities that you say have done programs that you're looking to benchmark?
Santa Monica is one of the bigger ones that has a very active program. And I know you did some additional research, Kirsten. Do you want to daylight?
Yeah, Los Angeles has a large program too. They have it is no longer in its pilot phase, and San Francisco. Yeah, and then we've I can't remember what the website is now, but there's a group that has done a study on what states are doing. California as a state doesn't have any regulations on delivery devices or autonomous vehicles yet. But there are a number of states that we looked at. There's a big table that we found that kind of highlights what the weight requirements are, speed limits, all the things that, or a number of things that we've included in within the augmentations here. Kind of looked at what those other states are doing.
And then I noticed that the speed limit on sidewalks, I think, correct me because I don't have it in front of me, was 10 miles per hour. But like 10 miles per hour, like an average jogger is going 6 miles per hour. So frankly, how did you come up with that number? Because frankly, a robot going 10 miles per hour down a side, a neighborhood sidewalk or the or say the pedestrian mall is probably 3 times the speed of people going there. So how did you come up with that number?
Yeah, that was something that, just looking at what other, communities and other states were doing and the speed limits that they set it at, but, we included the language in here on setting the pace, to be limited at what the pedestrians or cyclists around them are, going, so that, I think the average person walks 3 miles per hour. So the devices would have to follow that.
So they're able to do that to gauge what people or bicyclists around them are doing and mimic that speed. Okay, good to know. I didn't know that. And are you familiar with Washington DC? From what I've heard, they allow sidewalk robots on their more, or maybe they're bike roads, I don't know, on their more suburban areas, but in their downtown where they're encouraging walking, they've banned them because it's vehicles all, sidewalks are places for people. They become just like roads, places for vehicles. So are you familiar with cities that like Washington DC that have done that?
I haven't personally seen that. John, I don't know if you've come across anything.
I haven't, and I'm sorry, I'm not familiar with Washington DC's example. The one thing I would say is one of the intentions is we were trying to provide this as an opportunity, but also notice based upon the parameters, at best, there would be 30 devices anywhere in the city at any point in time. So up to 3
That was gonna
companies.
be in my comments.
And 10
Yeah.
devices. To the flip side of that, I would also just invite people, if you were to go down on Castro Street right now, you can see probably 15 DoorDash delivery drivers just waiting for pickups right now. And they're lingering all with their dual phones, just waiting for a pickup. Those are all single vehicle occupant trips.
But they're not driving on the side.
No, they've basically have
Double parked.
queued.
Right, but
They're queuing there, so I think part of what we're trying to solve is a little bit of providing another alternative for those that want it. And my last comment, expanding on the point would be, I think first and foremost, we'd always welcome people walking to their destination or biking to their destination. This is an alternative that's out there. And the reality is the marketplace is driving this. If there wasn't an interest in people having deliveries, there would not be a DoorDash around. There would not. These sectors don't grow just inert, they're driven by demand. So this is an offering, but we are not looking to, we certainly want to be encouraging of people walking and biking. That is always the better way to obtain your goods. We're just trying to provide another alternative, and potentially reducing some of the trips that are being generated by a large number of single vehicle occupants, drivers that are picking up items for people, making these short, quick trips all over our community.
yeah, so I have other things to say in my comments. I'm not anti-delivery. I just want to make sure it's being done in the right place. And not driving people off the site. So, and then what happened to the history with Starship? Like the history. So I can, like, one of the robots bumped into me on the sidewalk. They were not able to walk around. You know, if I stopped, they were not able to walk around me. They basically made me walk in the street. So what, and I would report this stuff to people because it was some program. And then did those reports go away or are they incorporated into this program?
So, thank you for the question. First question on Starship itself. Starship actually withdrew operations. They had asked the city on multiple occasions to expand. They were geofenced within the downtown area. They asked several times to expand that. We wanted more data from them to understand what was happening delivery wise, and that was something that was not being met. Therefore, we were allowing them to expand. When we as staff received inquiries from folks that had incidents, we would engage with Starship representation for the recording of that information to understand where that conflict was. We would occasionally get that data and you could see the device either stopping and thinking. And so we'd have those conversations with them about better ways of addressing the requirements, which was the device should be backing up or moving, creating a pathway for an individual to walk around. Ultimately, Starship ended up drawing, and at that time, the program sunset.
Yeah, I guess I'm just wondering because I reported a lot of those, you know, I'm familiar with that history and I reported a lot of that it bumped into me that I wouldn't have stopped in front of it. It was going too slow. That it was unable to, it just beeped at me and told me to move. So if I'd been in a wheelchair, we would have been stuck facing each other. So I feel like those are data to learn from. And I'm just wondering whether those things have been incorporated into this policy that they basically can't operate that way. They can't, I mean, it was beeping and telling me that it had priority over me as a pedestrian. It was in the middle of the sidewalk and I needed to go around and there was no other solution, which is fine for me. But, you know, like if I were in a wheelchair or somebody with vertigo or something, and it's just not okay for a robot to have priority over pedestrians. So I'm just wondering, was that learned from and is it incorporated into this policy?
It is. We've strengthened the requirements within the agreement for the reporting. We're also asking for additional ways to get that feedback. So in addition to whether it's reported on Ask MV, reported directly by the vendor itself, but we are also looking to capture in more ways than what we initially did. You will recall the Starship robots also did not really have contact information on them. There's a requirement of participating in the program of actually having contact information on the device. So it becomes a much quicker way to report incident.
And they said there was a person monitoring them and I'm not sure there actually was. And I'm not sure we had staff to follow up on whether they were actually doing what they said.
So yes, as I mentioned, a lot of lessons from that experience are reflected in both the contractual elements and also the program requirements that we are.
Okay, those are my questions.
Great. Thank you. Commissioner Matchak.
So along those lines, I appreciate your questions. Have we specifically told them that, you know, the situations that were described, how the robot needs to behave? Because I heard you talk about reporting and all these other things, but have we told them how the robot needs to behave? We have?
Well, I think that's something we can definitely incorporate into the standards and like looking at things like we added in the minimizing the amount of time stopping on curb ramps and at push buttons. More details can be added on that on how to reroute if they come into contact with the pedestrian, they're going, you know, the same or going opposite ways.
Okay.
And I would just also maybe further add, one of the other requirements we're asking is for a local presence. If you're going to be operating, and that was not the case with Starship. So there's a level of investment here and a slight presumption is if you're making that level of investment, you're going to want to ensure a better experience.
That was one of my questions. Is there a definition of local presence?
We've defined it as a Mountain View presence, whether that is either a home office, a maintenance facility, but actually having a physical space.
Okay. Then it talks about no more than 10 devices operating at one time. So they could actually have more than 10 in the city and they could be staging some to get ready. So if one comes back, one could go, be ready to go. So they might have 15, 20 devices. So it's the, how many are out there operating? Okay. And then the contact information, is that to somebody who's available 24/7? Or is that just the company and who's the contact at the city?
Yeah, so we have, so for the contact information that we're asking for a contact person that the city can have, so someone that police or fire can, for whatever reason, they need to contact a representative of the company to come get the device or something, or come out and look at it. Then there's someone who's available in case of emergencies. The contact information that would be on the device, maybe more of like a customer service line or someone that or information where a resident can go to make a complaint or ask questions or something. And then in terms of city contact, to be on the device, that hasn't quite yet been determined, but likely community development or
Okay. Let's see others. There are, it did say that there were limits in terms of the weight. Are there limits in terms of the physical size?
in terms of the size, we didn't set in the changes, we didn't set a limit for the height or width or the size of the devices in that sense, but I don't know, John, if do you have anything to add in terms of size?
No, we don't, we're not that prescriptive, as what we have seen, most of the operators there have a smaller form factor, especially the ones that tend to go on sidewalks. Because they are designed to be operating in a smaller space. But we haven't been prescriptive of how tall or the market will eventually dictate that. So that was something we didn't feel that prescribed.
So I'm thinking the 500 pounds. I could imagine something fairly good size, 500 pounds. I guess that's why I was asking about that.
Just a comment to add on
Yeah.
that too, so like an electric bike with a person riding it could potentially be that weight too. So if you think about it in that way, depending on the size of the e-bike, that might be a larger one, but that could be about that weight.
Okay. And I think, Allison asked the rest of my questions.
Great. I have a couple questions. So, I believe in the past, as part of the pilot program, public safety, some that had, that went forward, had invited public safety to actually come to their physical presence and do a tour and learn more about the device itself. I didn't see anything written in the staff report about how that might be something that we could add. Is that something good? I know that you talked about this, the contact person to respond to law enforcement, but would there be an opportunity for us to also ask? Because I think, should anything happen, right? And they get the call, is that something we could incorporate or recommend tonight as an addition or?
Yeah.
Okay. And then, so say this, goes forward to the full council. Is the idea that some of the data or the information would get reported back to BPAC or the the downtown committee? Would it come to CTC? Is that also an opportunity for us to give feedback on that tonight, or I don't know what the.
Absolutely. So I think very good questions, and those are things we absolutely welcome for feedback. By implementing a program, we certainly want to be able to have metrics to share. So whether that is a recommendation to come back to a specific body, whether it be full council, the BPAC or CTC, we're happy to do that. But one of the things you'll see in the augmentations is really to collect information. Part of a benefit of doing this is learning what's potentially changing. Is there a particular pattern that's going on? That can all be very useful to the city from a public policy making. So we'd love to include that information and certainly would take guidance from this body or the full council and what the preference might be in terms of coming back to which body. I would also say we would want to structure something where if there is a minor augmentation, at what point does this come back to council for a bigger conversation versus something that we need to make a small augmentation that doesn't materially change the program? So providing that authority to maybe the community development director or the public works director, providing some a little bit of a leeway around a program in that, and where are things that need to come back to the full body, or this is a significant change or could have a significant impact. We'd want council to look.
That's interesting. My understanding is that this came back to us as a consent item to continue the pilot program for 2020. Right, and that was, I think, more operator driven, right? There was some that participate. I think. Is that something staff wouldn't? Is that what you think a minor augmentation would be, like coming back to council for that, or, so I. It's kind of like chicken or egg, I suppose, right? Because we don't know what we would be delegating the authority to whomever. So I think in that instance, if there's an operator or somebody who wants to participate, that would, I don't want to go too far into discussion, but I'm trying to,
So
I guess,
maybe to answer the question, so part of the action council took was effectively the program, because it was adopted as a pilot, when COVID-19 happened, it was a way to provide an opportunity. So that 2020 action wasn't prior to COVID, it was in the middle of COVID.
Right.
So by taking a more formal action in adopting a program, which we're not asking you to do this evening, we're definitely seeking feedback from the committee is, we could define what would be the ground rules for needing to come back. If it's something of, having to do with more information on the device that we think is critically important because of lessons learned, that may be viewed as a minor modification to the program. Whereas going from 3 companies to 10, that may be viewed as maybe the fuller body needs to better understand that, and we can outline what those parameters would be. Kind of seeking what would be a minor modification versus something defined as a much bigger, where we think there needs to be a bigger involvement from the council and the community in discussion.
the decision that this committee would make tonight or any recommendations are going on as an action item, correct? So it would be for the final adoption for the council of, so.
This is strictly feedback, whether this can be improved, whether this is not the right program. Staff will want to evaluate, address anything that this body comes up with. We would like to go to council with a program, but if there's not a willingness there, we will certainly incorporate that feedback and decide whether this program doesn't move on or this program should go to council.
Well, hopefully this is eliminated from my colleagues as well, and I wasn't sure, okay. All right,
Seems like we do things here that are like not quite a study session, not quite.
right, well, it says receive update and provide feedback, so I wasn't
Right.
sure, so I think that clarifies, so we can make augmentations, right, and then have it come back to CTC. We could make augmentations, have it go to the full body. I think that will be part of our deliberation, so I was invite all of us
Thank you for
to.
asking.
Yes, just to clarify, and hopefully it'll be clear for the public who I know probably are ready to give us public comment if there aren't any more questions. All right, great, thank you very much. Would any member of the public joining us virtually or in person like to provide comment on this item? If so, please click the raise hand button in Zoom or approach the lectern. We'll take in-person speakers first, and each speaker will have 3 minutes. So we'll start with in-person. Go ahead. And please just at least state your name for the public. Thank you.
Cliff Chambers, resident of Mountain View. As you're aware, when the council took up the scoring criteria on the active transportation plan, referred it back to your committee, because with the cart before the horse, essentially you made. And I really feel the same way about this. Here we are doing an active transportation plan. We're going to see a network. Where on the network would the PDTs go? Would they be able to go on Stevens Creek Trail, protected bike lane? What kind of facilities would they be? We don't really know. And it's an important question to answer. There's going to be policies as part of the active transportation plan. And some of those policies are going to be what mobility devices, and they're emerging over time, are going to be allowed in various bicycle infrastructure. And those policies should consider PDDs, but you're doing this totally out of context with the rest of the active transportation plan. So I urge you to step back, as you did before, and make this as part of the policy decision of the overall active transportation plan. The second point I'd like to make is that I really feel my personal bias is that sidewalks and bicycle lanes are for moving people primarily. I'm not so much against PDDs, but as Councilmember Hicks says, they really need to be done right. And I haven't seen the evidence, the data. If there's data from Santa Monica, data from LA, data nationally from the National Academy of Sciences, I want to see how these have been working. Has there been impediments to bicyclists, to pedestrians? We want to make this active transportation network safe and secure, so more people are going to be riding bicycles and walking. And I don't want a 500-pound PDD going on a protected bike lane that gets stuck in, it could create a lot of problems. And I just don't have enough data to make an informed choice in terms of whether this will work or not. So I really urge you to, and the data is not even included on the Starship experiment, where there are pedestrian interferences, etc. And I think there's just a lack of data for you to really go forward. So I urge you to get more data before you make a decision, but I'd really like to see it as broader part of the active transportation plan. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. So my name is still Serge Bont, and I'm still a resident of Mountain View. So I first had one question that came up during presentation. Why don't we have a mobile vending permit for DoorDash and Uber Eats deliveries? I don't know. That seems to me that would be a way to regulate them, at least, where they should be stopping, what sort of insurance they should carry and so on. That seems to be the Wild West there. So I appreciate the need for economic development. We all need, this type of things, and I appreciate that Mountain View is supportive of this type of things. But in this case, it looks like Mountain View already has spent a lot of time doing 2 pilots, essentially, without any data coming back, being, like hard data, how many complaints did we get, what were the issues and so on. So there are many other things that the city could be doing instead of this. So that's my view on this. It's disappointing to not see basic geometry used here. So I'm all for tech. There are a lot of cool designs there with radars, cameras, and so on. But to me, it comes down to basic geometry. So just like Council Member Hicks, I walk a lot, I bike a lot, and most of our sidewalks and most of our bike lanes are narrow. So the width of these things is very important. And I think it's just not very serious not to have that basic information to see if they even fit in a bike lane. And then the experience when I walk is that whenever I encounter somebody in a wheelchair or somebody with a stroller, I just make way, just like I leave my seat to the bus. The space is better for them. They need the space more than I do. And I just get on the streets and go around them. I'm not sure that the robot needs the space more than I do. I would probably go there because I'm able, but some of my friend neighbors, they won't be able to go on the walk. They'll get stuck. and keep in mind that these robots are delivery robots. So they will stop for 5-10 minutes until somebody goes pick up the thing. So it's not a question of will they be blocking things? They will. The same is true in a bike lane. When I bike, whenever there's an obstacle or a slow cyclist, I merge into traffic. I'm very confident. I don't mind doing this. Do I mind this if it's for a robot? Probably. But many other bikers won't be able to do this out of fear. And they may try to do it once, be scared, and not bike anymore. That's the wrong things. In the steps, you should stop at this thing. So thank you.
We'll move on to virtual speakers.
Yes. Bruce England, I'm going to click to allow you to talk. Please unmute yourself and you'll have 3 minutes.
Thanks, Brandon. Bruce England, Wisman Station Drive. Hello, committee members and staff. Yeah, when this first came up with Starship, I was pretty much against it, but I have somewhat changed my opinion because I've had the experience over the last year or so with my elderly parents, seeing how dependent they are on home service and home delivery. They can't drive, and they're really homebound basically. And so highly dependent on that, it really has been an important thing for them to be able to keep their autonomy and to be able to stay at home. The whole aging in place thing that we have in Mountain View is really important. So, however, I do think we should do this right as much as we can. So I agree with other comments that have been made so far. I have a couple of questions based on the staff report. The one had to do with the e-bike delivery comment that was made at a BPAC meeting. There was a lot of interest in that when it was discussed at BPAC, and yet it isn't further discussed in the memo. I would really like that to be taken up and taken seriously. Prioritize bike delivery over robot delivery if that's possible. Next one is about with restrictions. I mean, there aren't any with restrictions that I saw. There's a weight restriction, but not the width. And as Serge said, that's really critical. We don't want things blocking the way if we can avoid it. And the next one is consider allowing devices to operate within bike lanes. I'm not sure consider is the right word. I think that it should be a preferred means. I think we should avoid having the devices on the sidewalks because we ran into all kinds of trouble with the earlier implementation of the sidewalks. Too small space to have those devices there if we can avoid it. The thing about documenting all public inquiries and complaints, it says a spreadsheet summary, but it doesn't say where that's going to be. It's very vague on how that's going to be posted. Are you drawing from Ask Mountain View? Are you drawing from vendor complaints, city complaints? And is that going to be publicly available so we can see what's going on? The mobile vending permit, that really puzzles me because that's not really who the vendor is. It's a platform for delivering items, and they could have multiple vendors, including some of the small businesses that people like Kavita IR have been talking about, and others promoting that sort of thing. John Lang knows about that. So I'd like to see that being more flexible and not necessarily having that permit tied to the device vendor, but rather to the people who are actually selling the food, etc. And that's it from me. Thank you.
Thank you, Bruce. Laura Risley of Value Robotics. I'm going to click to allow you to talk. Please unmute yourself and you'll have 3 minutes.
Hi, my name is Laura Risley. I'm the Chief Commercial Officer for Value Robotics. I am here today to express my appreciation and to encourage the relaunch of the personal delivery device program in Mountain View. I'll take the first half of my time with you just to remind the committee of the numerous benefits to our community. And then I'll wrap up with a few ideas for maybe quickening the reimplementation of the program. First, a quick reminder of a few ways in which the citizens of Mountain View stand to gain from this program. Personal delivery devices do offer a convenience to busy families, to individuals with mobility challenges, and to our seniors, like the former speaker suggested, providing them with access to necessities like groceries and prescriptions without leaving their home. Also, it does support the Mountain View local businesses by enhancing their ability to serve their customers. From an environmental perspective, the benefits are equally significant. PDDs are typically electric and they produce zero emissions. So if we replace those delivery vehicles with PDDs, we can lower Mountain View's carbon footprint, which I think aligns perfectly with your broader environmental goals. Public safety is another critical area where this program shines. Fewer delivery trucks and vans mean reducing traffic congestion, which enhances the safety for pedestrians and cyclists. In doing a little research, it seems that you have broad support for relaunching the program and you're now focused on making a few important improvements. Given that a few other Bay Area communities followed Mountain View's lead and adopted their own PDD programs, I'd like to make a few soft suggestions for sort of a straighter path to maybe getting the PDDs back on the road in the community. Firstly, I'd like to suggest that perhaps the CTC could recommend that staff at least begin publicizing the program and accepting applications. Of course, with the caveat that the program is still being redefined. Secondly, I'd like to recommend that if a PDD company has met the requirements for certification in a neighboring Bay Area community, would it be possible to leverage the work done in that community to fast track the approvals to operate in Mountain View, so long as the neighboring city requirements are similar? And then lastly, I'd like to encourage you to definitely get this done. While it is true that other communities have implemented their own PDD programs in the Bay Area, Vayu at least is eager to operate here, close to home. I do want to commend the committee for considering the relaunch of the program. It's a progressive step toward a more convenient, environmentally friendly, and safe city.
Thank you.
Carl Hansen, I'm going to click to allow you to talk. Please unmute yourself and you'll have 3 minutes.
Good evening, council members. I'm Carl Hansen, head of government relations at Coco, a remotely piloted delivery robot service that has been operating in Southern California cities since 2020, currently in Los Angeles, West Hollywood, and city of Santa Monica. We've completed hundreds of thousands of miles of safe, sustainable, and cost-effective deliveries with our sidewalk delivery robots. Tonight, I'm speaking in strong support of the updates proposed by city staff to the program in Mountain View. In California today, almost all food delivery is done in a car, and often those services charge exorbitant fees to merchants. There's really no reason to have a 1-pound poke bowl in a 2-ton car going for a 2-mile delivery when a delivery robot can complete the same delivery trip with 0 emissions and with significant cost savings to the merchants. In many markets where we operate, over 60% of merchant volume is within a 2-mile radius, the 2-mile radius that we serve. So there's a sizable portion of car trips that we can help reduce, and traffic and illegal parking and bike lanes as delivery drivers, rush inside to figure out which order is theirs. We can cut a big chunk of that down. Safety, I think it is a very valid concern. Totally understand the questions and concerns raised here. That's been a top priority for us since launching. And we're proud to have had no significant accidents or injuries over those hundreds of thousands of miles of travel we've done. Our pilots are trained to act as the most respectful form of pedestrian, in that they yield to all other sidewalk users, even pets. And they're especially mindful of anyone who may have a mobility challenge or look confused around a bot. If there's a narrow sidewalk and say there's like a sandwich board sign that blocks part of the pathway, the bot is trained to pull to the side or actually back up if there are pedestrians that need to pass. We operate in some of the busiest pedestrian areas in the country: Hollywood Boulevard, Santa Monica Promenade, Abbot Kinney in Venice. Abbot Kinney has very narrow sidewalks, a very busy shopping district. Would love for anyone from the city or the council, if you happen to be down in LA, to either visit us at our headquarters. Would love to show you a Coco in the wild at one of our merchant partners. We'd also be happy to bring a bot up to Mountain View to demo there at City Hall if appropriate. did want to say one thing on fleet cap size. Completely understand the desire to, limit a new technology as they're introduced, but I would hope the program would allow staff to grant an increase in fleet size if something's going well. And
15
obviously,
seconds.
obviously not if it's not. We're super excited about the program proposed. Happy to answer any questions and hope you move this forward tonight. Thank you.
Yeah.
Zaida Corns, I'm going to click to allow you to talk. Please unmute yourself and you have 3 minutes.
Hello, I'm Theta Corns. I am a 25-year resident of Mountain View and also an MPLA trustee on the Active Transportation Committee. I'm actually speaking as a member of the Active Transportation Committee. We value our partnership with the city, and to my knowledge, we have not discussed PDDs on the Active Transportation Committee. I don't have comments as to the trade-off of PDDs at this time. I do have a couple of questions as a member of the Active Transportation Committee. My first question is, why is City Council considering PDDs as a separate policy and not part of an active transportation policy? And my second question relates to the city report. The city report reads, the PDD travels approximately 4 miles per hour, which is similar to a typical pedestrian. So why is the maximum speed set to 5 miles per hour? Thank you very much.
You, April Webster, I'm going to click to allow you to talk. Please unmute yourself and you'll have 3 minutes.
Hi, April Webster. I'm also on the Mountain View ATP TAC. I'm speaking for myself though, and I want to say that I strongly feel the TC should recommend this program be slowed down so we can get it right. There is a lot at risk here, and I urge you to think carefully and critically with the city's goals in mind to evaluate whether this will actually encourage more people to walk and bike, or in my opinion, discourage them and therefore be not in line with the city's goals. I would also like to echo Theta's question about why this is being considered outside of the ATP and hasn't yet come before the TAC. To me, this program seems like backwards progress for the city of Mountain View, especially in relation to its goals to encourage more people to walk and bike. Just from the Mountain View Voice a few days ago, in quotes, over the past decade, Mountain View has taken steps to prioritize pedestrian and bicycle-related projects with ambitious goals to develop the city's traffic corridors into safe, accessible, and low-stress routes for walkers, bikers, and rollers. And I want to ask you again, are we going to walk the walk and ensure that the streets are actually being designed for people first? I'm in agreement with Cliff that sidewalks and bicycle lanes should be prioritized for moving people, not machines. A lot of people fall into the category of interested but concerned. And we've heard this multiple times over the past few years. And that forms about 50 to 60% of the population. And my sense is that people falling into that category wouldn't feel safe and comfortable with delivery bots in the lane. I would also like to see some of the gaps in this analysis addressed, and a thorough and unbiased cost-benefit analysis and a risk assessment at the least. I think failing to do so could be negligent. I'd like to understand how the company intends to address requirements such as bicyclist safety and perception of safety, which really does impact modality shift and bike lane usage, potential bot bicyclist conflicts, software, hardware bugs and failures, etc. It's not unusual for robots to break down or even just run low on battery. This isn't unusual. There have been a number of issues with self-driving cars. San Francisco recently filed a lawsuit suing California over self-driving cars. And then I'd like to make an enthusiastic plug for e-bike delivery prioritization. This seems more economic and environmentally friendly option. And, in my career, I've been in the tech industry for
15 seconds.
a couple of decades. And to me, this seems like when you have a hammer, every problem starts to look like a nail. I think there are other options that we can consider that would be a better solution for delivery. Thank you.
Evan Crow, I'm gonna click to allow you to talk. Please unmute yourself and you'll have 3 minutes.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Hi, my name is Evan Crow. I recently moved to Mountain View in the last year or so. And I am here to speak against the approval of this pilot program. I guess I first have to say that as a new resident, you know, with experience living elsewhere, I really think our pedestrian and cycling infrastructure and facilities in the city currently is subpar. And I understand there are ambitious plans to improve those things. However, to get to the point, in my neighborhood, sidewalks are 4 feet wide and obstructed every dozen feet or so by a street sign or a very steep sloped surface, which is a driveway. And it's a busy, lots of pedestrians around. And frankly, you can't even walk and pass someone if you're walking with your partner, or if you're passing someone who has grocery bags in their hand, you have to step off of the sidewalk to pass them. And I just can't imagine, well, I personally would be really frustrated if I had to then deal with a robot from some private company that's trying to just make a bunch of money using up the really poor sidewalk that I have to use already to do my daily errands. Likewise, in the street of my neighborhood, the bike lanes, many of them are essentially in the gutter and border on high-speed traffic, 35 miles an hour or more. And I would be pretty concerned if there was a robot in that bike lane who might stop to deliver or stall. You know, many of these self-driving vehicles stall, because really leaving the bike lane is a pretty dangerous proposition when the traffic is going 35 miles an hour. And then lastly, I just want to touch on the environmental considerations, which I really think this would be well, yeah, I mean, we should be encouraging people to walk to their destinations or cycle rather than stay at home and order them to be delivered to their homes. So really, I think delivery robots would have a negative effect on the environmental considerations. And that's all my comments. Thanks.
Thank you, Emil Abraham. I'm going to click to allow you to talk. Please unmute yourself and you'll have 3 minutes.
Hi, my name is Emil Abraham. I live on Middlefield Road. Overall, I'm generally in favor of businesses working with the city. Google has certainly helped create some of the better bike lanes in Mountain View. However, this technology, it's very much in its infancy, right? We're like a pilot program. So like the previous public comments, I'm not sure what the best paths would be to reduce the odds of like an accident occurring. So we should probably approach this in the safest way possible. I'd hate for this idea to die in the cradle. So one thing I'd like for staff and council members to consider is what we as a city get from this relationship. Right now, it seems like all we get is maybe some data, but we inherit all the risks and all the bad reputation that could happen if there is an accident or something, some bad news. So I think it would be in the city's best interest to seek something in return. So maybe the companies will only allow these bots in extremely wide and safe pathways at first, and then we can very gradually move it. But if they would like to operate in narrower pathways, perhaps they could provide some funding to widen those pathways so that not only they can use it, maybe it'll help other bicyclists and pedestrians get better walkways. So this way they can at least leave the city in a better place, regardless of the results of the pilot program. Thank you. That's all.
And there are no more hands raised, Chair.
Great, thank you. All right, I'll close public comment and bring it back to the committee for, I suppose, deliberations, as it's a received report, so. Deliberations, or if there's any additional questions, sorry. Committee member Hicks.
So I think I took a lot of notes while people were talking. My personal preference would be that bikes be for bikers and sidewalks be for pedestrians, and that we encourage, as there have been, delivery robots that would be on the road. I think Neuro was one. I'm not sure what happened to Neuro. But they were one that was going to operate on the road, and that would be my preference. And then e-cargo bikes for bike lanes. However, if that may not be the preference of the majority of council. So in the case that may not be, I think, and the reason I think that is that I really think we're trying to encourage more people to bike and walk, and we're trying to make them low stress and attractive places to bike and walk. And I don't think that's what robots would be doing. And I think there are other places for them, roads and then e-cargo bikes on bikeways. However, if my additional comments on top of that would be, I agreed with speakers who said we're kind of putting the cart before the horse, that this has to be a considered part of putting together the active transportation plan. It has to, I would say it has to go to the active transportation committee and go through all the outreach that the active transportation plan would be going through. I would like it to still be a pilot and open to change. And the reason is that there's so many, I think one of the commentators said this is in its infancy, and I really think it is. I mean, while I was driving my car today, I heard a lot of reports about e-cargo bikes being implemented, being the thing that's being implemented in cities in New York, and that they're completely changing the bike lanes to accommodate them. So if that's something that spreads around, you know, that really impacts what we're doing here. And I would hate to have a very set policy just for the companies that are coming to us now when there are a number of new things coming down the road. So still be a pilot, open to change. I said I would like to encourage cargo bike delivery and the robot delivery on the road. I have read, as I read this staff report, I read that in some states, and I believe these are very auto-oriented states actually, they're giving PDDs the rights of pedestrians, just like corporations have been given the rights of people. And I would like to lobby against that happening in California. I don't think that robots should be considered people or pedestrians. I also think that I would like, if this is operating as a pilot, I would like the information data, whether it be complimentary or complaints, to be available to the public and transparent, because I feel like the experience we went through with Starship, the information that we gathered, and like I said, it was happening all around. They were on my sidewalks all the time. They would get stuck in my driveway and my husband would go out and help them along. I mean, it was like a daily experience. And I think all that information just disappeared. So I would like it to be transparent. Oh, and the other comment on having them not stop at the, you said you'd make, one of the things we learned was to have them not stop at the, the entry to the curb. Yes. The comments that people were making on that is they were stopping and blocking, and people had to stand in the road and couldn't get off the crosswalk and onto the sidewalk. So that wasn't that wasn't a minor thing. People got stuck in the street. So I guess my big thing is it needs to be a pilot. It needs to go to the, am I saying the name of this right? To the Active Transportation Committee and be an integrated part of that of that whole process so that we do prioritize sidewalks. So that we make our sidewalks and bikeways low stress places that attract people to do more biking and walking. Thank you.
I have a few questions first. Were we thinking that these could go in any type of bike lane? Protected bike lane? Something where it's green paint, one where there's just line.
I think it's not something that's necessarily been hashed out yet, and that would need to be discussed with the public works.
Have any of the companies that want to do this say their preference for operating on the sidewalk, in the street, in the bike lane, trails? Like, is there a general sense of what they want to do?
It seems like it's varied a little bit by company, but from what we've heard, the companies, they try and take routes where sidewalks are larger, where it's generally easier for them to get around and not get in the way of people. But I do think it may vary by company, and I understand that might differ from the experience with Starship that you're describing, but John, do you have anything to add?
The one thing I would be very clear about on trails, our code actually explicitly prohibits it. So that is something we're not looking at opening up to at all. We've been very clear in conversations with folks. So the code currently prohibits that, so that's not something we'll explore. And just to echo what Kristen shared, which is conversations with different providers, they're looking for the clearest path forward as well for them. So most don't just do randomized things. They'll create kind of, these are the two best ways to get into this neighborhood, and then figure out once you're in the neighborhood where to get to that destination. But they want to find that most clear path. They don't want to be, say, crossing shoreline at an unsignalized intersection, as a for instance, right? So you would want to designate, this is where you're going to cross. So there is some thought that goes into designing, and once again, most all the providers do have some ability to geofence their devices. You cannot go on this path, this place. Those are all requirements that could be given.
And I think I heard you say that we haven't had any interest from the e-bikes, the cargo bikes. Did I hear that?
Absolutely correct.
Okay. So I'm kind of, I guess, surprised at some of the discussion here tonight. I think that it's nice to have new technology. It's nice to provide another way of helping people that need help. As was mentioned by one of the speakers tonight, we have some residents who are stuck at home, and for them to get delivery of food, medicine, books from the library is really important. I don't view this at all as part of the active transportation plan. To me, the active transportation plan is about people, not robots. So I don't think it makes sense to include this in that. I do think it's important to put some parameters on this. I'm a little bit concerned about the 500-pound weight limit. I guess I prefer to stick with the smaller robots and have some sort of width restrictions. And what's most important to me is that no matter where they operate, that people and bicycles and animals are the priority, not the robot. And so they need to figure out how to program them or control them to make that happen. And that's at intersections, that, if it's in a bike lane, if it's on the sidewalk. I would also like to control where it goes. So I don't want it on a sidewalk or a bike lane where then the pedestrian or the bicyclists are crowded out. Because again, that's not prioritizing pedestrians or bicyclists. So we might have to put some restrictions on that. But I do think it's important to embrace new technology and give it a try and make the best of it, because clearly it is something that people value. I don't think this is taking away from people walking or biking. I'm hoping it takes away from people driving because it's the delivery of things they might be driving a car to get to. So I guess I'm willing to go forward with, having maybe the next round with this group to say, here's what we heard, here's how we're planning to modify it, and then have it go to council. I think that's it for now.
Thank you. Well, one of the things that I love about living in Mountain View, growing up here, is that I feel like we're always adapting and changing, and I think it falls into the community for all in the ways that we try to innovate in our openness and willingness to try new things, especially when it comes to helping our residents and obviously our business community. So I'll caveat my comments with that. I think, for myself, it's the first time that I'm having the opportunity to really discuss it since I came to council in 2018, and then in 2020 it was a consent item, so I think perhaps that's also part of the feedback we're receiving tonight, is that there's been no avenue, I feel, to really talk about personal delivery devices. And so I think in that way, there's a lot of feedback, and I would say some suggestions that I'd love to share and see if my colleagues agree with in terms of if this were to move forward. I'm hearing there's some openness, and I think at this point, it should continue as a pilot program. I wouldn't go beyond pilot. Part of that is the pilot began in 2018, but I don't feel like we have any data. And I feel like that's really a missing component on being able to move forward with anything more permanent. And I think that's part of the discussion is there's really, I would say, a lot of open threads, but there's nothing to kind of weave it together. And so for this to go forward, I would hope that it would be successful in that we would be able to have data, understanding if this works for the community of Mountain View. So some suggestions that I think are important are network. So I also feel like the active transportation plan, while it's important, and I think that it should be the dots should be connected. I do see this as something different, but I want to understand where the devices may operate. And as Mr. Lang was saying, if it's going to take a most direct route, what are those routes? I think in that way, I'd also like the community to provide feedback on if they think that those are routes where there could be potential conflict zones. And I agree with Committee Member Matashek in that we're looking to eliminate any potential points of conflict, whether it's a cyclist, somebody walking, had someone in a wheelchair, right? So as part of the program, pilot program, I would hope that applicants would be able to provide a draft network or a map. And I think that would also be really helpful in terms of maybe alleviating any safety concerns or better understanding the technology. I understand that they can geofence it. We can also say as Starship, right, it can only operate in a certain area. But I think more transparency on that is important for it to go forward. I also would love to see kind of comps from the other cities. So we talked about Venice, LA, Santa Monica. My understanding is there's a pilot going on in San Ramon. And I'd love for us to have a chart to understand what the different devices are, how they're being operated in these different communities. I get a better sense of what we can figure out what could maybe work for Mountain View. What this is. And
I think, let's see. I love the idea of exploring the e-cargo, and I wonder if there's a way, do those fall under P or not, right? And so I'd love for staff to be able to come back and share more about that. And perhaps it's also a proactive side on the city to see what companies are out there, if they're operating, and if this is something of interest for them. Since the community feedback has expressed that it's of interest. So those are my suggestions. I'm open to also understanding kind of the weight with height. And maybe those can be in the conflict to us with those companies that are operating in other jurisdictions. So we can have a better sense. So my suggestion to the committee would be provide our feedback to staff to investigate a pilot program about the CTC before moving forward to council. If we should choose, that would be my suggestion.
Sure, I mean, I would agree with having a pilot program. And I would agree with, just because our comments were kind of disparate, I would agree with, doing outreach. And I think sometimes companies come to us, but sometimes whether it's the library, bookmobile or whatever, I don't think the bookmobile contacted us. I think we contacted the vendor for the bookmobile, smaller thing, but I think we can contact the e-cargo, but also the BPAC brought up something like that. So I think we can do outreach to them if that ends up being one of our preferred delivery forms. And then, yeah, doing a pilot is fine. It's super important to me that the data be transparent that we get, because I feel like, people who felt like they were stuck in the road and couldn't get back on the sidewalk or those different things just seem to have disappeared. And Starship promised us they wouldn't do those things, but it didn't happen. So I just don't want to repeat that experience. Then I also hope that we can, I'm losing some of the numbers in all of this, but no more than 10 devices operating at one time. I think Member Matichek said she doesn't want to crowd out pedestrians and bikers. And that's really my main, I don't care if it's few robots, as long as, they're safe, they're not blocking people so they can't walk, so forth. I don't care if a few of them are around. I just don't want to have, for example, a pedestrian mall with like more robots than people. Or a sidewalk that happens. I like that you brought up the routes that people choose. I wouldn't want to be somebody living in a neighborhood where my sidewalk was the one that was chosen to go to a larger, bunch of houses, and they were just constant streams of them coming down my particular sidewalk, no one else's. Those are the kinds of things that I want to make sure don't happen. And then the other thing, I do have a concern about the pedestrian mall, that they aren't just streaming out of the restaurants. There is an alley behind every single restaurant. So I would prefer that they, that they exit from the alley rather than be all over the pedestrian mall, so that maybe it's hard to, whatever you do there, window shop, play cornhole, whatever.
And I wonder for those jurisdictions where our device is operating, does the restaurant or retail like opt in, or do they like form a partnership with? I don't know how that relationship is, but I know one of the speakers discussed Abbot Kinney, and if you've been to Abbot Kinney, it's similar. From what I recall, it's also closed down. It's and I don't know how that operates. So I don't know if it's a like for like, or I know Santa Monica Promenade, right, where there's areas that are shut down. So maybe we could get, I feel like there's more information before formally moving forward. And so I don't feel comfortable recommending
kind of anything beyond gathering more information on a potential pilot at this point, so. But I agree, right? Don't wanna.
I have a question. The pilot that we had, didn't we require them to not be in Castro? They left from the back.
They left from the front
they
and it
did?
was not at that time. Yeah, they were all staged in front. They were loaded from the front and they would take off from the front of Castro Street.
Okay, so I agree with not having them pedestrian mall area. Because that is, we're prioritizing pedestrians there. I agree with your comments, Chair Kamei, and it would be useful to have more data. Let's see. Guess that's it.
It's been very helpful. I think there's some very strong themes around more information, better categorized information. Happy to work on this and obviously look into e-cargo opportunities, what's out there. Didn't really appreciate the community's feedback.
I think lastly, too, understanding where they operate, are they in the right of way? Yeah. Thank you so much. Great. All right, so I think this concludes item 5.1. The staff think that you were given feedback. You don't need a motion. Great, wonderful. All right, we'll move on to item 5.2, California Street West Complete Street Improvements Pilot Project 21-40 Performance Metrics. The staff presentation will be provided by Juan Nguyen, Associate Civil Engineer. Robert Gonzalez, Principal Civil Engineer, will be available to answer questions after the presentation.
So, by Robert. Yes. Okay. Go ahead, Cecilia.
You can just switch.
Oh, sure.
No, just the placards. Yeah. That was empty, yeah.
Share. Yeah, that's your second screen.
Window P. So window P, Windows key and. Open. You need to see your notes.
Yes.
Windows P, hit it back to extend. And then undo this. So take it out of full screen. And then snap. Now try it again and see if it switches it because you're connected to the monitor. Go ahead and click here to go to presentation. Right here to the presentation. No, right above it, again. Yep. So, yeah.
Brandon, share.
Oh, you unplugged it. I didn't realize you unplugged it. Good, there we go.
Thank you. All right, good evening, committee members. My name is Hoàng Will, Associate Civil Engineer with the Civil Infrastructures. I'm here today with Robert Gonzalez, Principal Civil Engineer, to provide the project update, where we are at, and to get CTC feedback on performance metrics for the California Street Complete Street Improvements pilot phase. Project location is on California between Showers Drive and Shoreline Boulevard, as highlighted yellow. The project design is based on the 2015 California Escalera Shoreline Complete Street feasibility study. The study recommended implementing complete street improvements along California in 2 phases. First phase is a pilot phase created through pavement markings and temporary improvements, including 4-lane to 3-lane road diet, 2-way left-hand center lane, parking protected bylanes, mid-block crossing with lighting, protected intersection treatments at selected intersection. The permanent phase will convert temporary improvements to permanent, including green street landscaping features at intersection and mid-block crossing locations. This project will implement the pilot phase of the study. Existing condition. Existing condition can be split into 2 distinct segments. First segment is from Showers to Mariposa. This segment comprises mostly multi-family homes, 2 travel lanes in each direction. The area have 2 ways, center left-hand lane, parking on one or both sides. There are striped by lane next to the curb or between the parking and travel lane. Second segment is from Mariposa to Shoreline. This segment consists of primary single-family homes. There is center landscape median, parking on both sides, 2 travel lanes in that direction, and by lane between parking and travel lanes. On October 12, 2023, the project was brought to CTC to provide project update. The updated design included additional improvements as the result of incorporating feedback received from the BPAC. The first feedback was to include a permit block crossing. The permit block crossing was added to the project. Location is between Ortega and Ramsdorf, as shown in the top left corner image. The location was strategically selected to improve access to Glen Park. The second and third feedback from the BPAC were to consider sturdier vertical devices than the typical flexible post, and to consider green street infrastructure. We have selected 5 vertical devices to apply as test cases along the corridor, as shown on the top right corner image. These devices include K71, Plug B, Rubber Curb, Armadillo, and planter box. Green street infrastructure will be provided to the user planter box. The last feedback from the BPAC was to update the committees on the performance metrics. I will talk about them in later slides. Because this is a big corridor with a lot of elements, I will walk you through a couple examples of the finished design layout. West end of the corridor between Showers and Ortega planter box, and K71 are used. This Apoteca, we are using Armadillo and floppies with small base. Second example showed is end segments. So from Mariposa to Pettis, K71 and planter box are used. K71 from Pettis to Palo Alto, and from Palo Alto to Shoreline, we are installing floppies with long base. Performance metrics. As mentioned earlier, the last feedback from the BPAC was to update the committees on the performance criteria. The goal of this step is to evaluate the success of the project. You may wonder how we selected these metrics. We selected these metrics that will allow us to efficiently collect data without substantial efforts, while still collecting sufficient data necessary to identify corridor performance. 6 metrics were selected, including bicycle counts, pedestrian counts, jaywalking counts, vehicle speed, and collision reports. Data will be collected for both pre and post construction. We plan to collect the data in the summer and fall of this calendar year, or until construction begins for pre-construction, and quarterly for 1 year after construction. Data will be collected by both staff and consultants. We also utilize past traffic data such as bicycle counts, jaywalking counts. Next step, the design is complete. Council approved project plans and specs specifications and authorized staff to advertise the project for bids on May 28. Construction is planned for late summer of this year. Pre-construction data will be starting this summer. After construction is complete and post-construction data are collected and evaluated, staff will return to CTC to present the results of the corridor performance. That's conclude my presentation.
Great, thank you. Do any committee members have questions? As our manager.
Thank you. I have a few questions. So we have a bunch of vertical elements that we're testing. And so I was wondering, do we have metrics or how are we going to evaluate those? I was kind of expecting to see that in a lot of the other performance metrics.
So we're really looking at 2 items here. One is maintainability. We want to see that these are durable enough to kind of take a beating. Sometimes these are especially the ones that are closest to the corner will get hit occasionally. So we want them to be able to be maintainable, replaceable. So we're going to get feedback from our maintenance crews on those, and also obviously effectiveness. Which ones work on this particular corridor? They've all been proven. They've all been traffic rated, so we know that they're effective somewhere. We just want to see if they work for this corridor. We're taking this opportunity to try these out on California. If we like them, we may look at other corridors for those. So we didn't create criteria and metrics for the performance of this particular element. It was really about the pilot itself was the criteria. That's how we developed.
Okay. And in the staff report, it talked about how there will be data collection devices. And do those work for all of those? Like how does it measure jaywalk?
The jaywalking is the most expensive. And that is actually required video requirement. So we put that on the consultant. We asked that they include that as part of their proposal. So we mounted some cameras. Actually, it was about a year ago at specific locations where we knew there was a lot of jaywalking near the commercial area. So we did pre-construction counts already for jaywalking. And then after the improvements are in place, we'll repost those cameras and do a post-construction survey. The simpler ones are
things like the bubbler counts, where we know how to do them.
Okay. And are we also keeping track of complaints? And that could be complaints from many different sources, from delivery drivers who can no longer park there, from people who can't find a parking spot, from people using the bike lane saying, this is an issue here or that's an issue there. Are we gonna keep track of those and update on that too?
So we're making a deliberate effort to do some outreach to users of the corridor, including the school. We haven't yet reached out to delivery drivers yet, but we anticipate if we can put out some yard signs with a QR code or with connection to like an Ask MV or a survey, we'll start getting feedback on users very quickly. So far we did do a staff-led survey. We have started to get responses back pre-construction. We've got 700 as of last week. That's right. This is it's also a long corridor. Keep in mind the number of users, the multiple variety. Yeah, correct. The variety of users. So that's in a combination of a social media effort as well as the yard signs. So we'll keep that up for a while. We'll collect all that. There still needs to be a lot of work for us to comb through all of those comments as well. And then we'll also do a post-construction survey. We want to get a feel for all of the metrics we identified, and then also it's important that the corridor feels and the experience is that it's safer. So some of the questions on the survey was, how do you use it now? How would you expect to use it in the future? And do you feel safe using it now? Those would be natural feedback loops when we go to a post-construction phase.
Okay. So I'll just say my quick comment. I thought the metrics you proposed were spot on, so thanks. Thank you.
Ask most of my questions. What are you looking for in the, the bicycle, pedestrian, jaywalking vehicle speed collision? I kind of get what that's about. But are you looking to see whether people are walking more or biking more on particular stretches or the entire thing, or what are the goals?
So originally the goals of the study, speeding was a big concern on this corridor. So a lot of the design was designed around narrowing the lanes. The road diet was specifically designed to slow speeds. So that's really where we started, was what are the vehicle counts and what are the vehicle speeds? How does that look? And then the other ones developed from there. Honestly, I wasn't sure if bicycle counts would change over 12 months, but we wanted to start there to see if there was actually more usage. So are there more people using bikes? Are there more pedestrians? How do they use it? Are they using it more frequently? I think some of the bike counts, if we're counting it along the corridor, we'll get a sense of how people are using it, if they're using it for longer trips. And that goes along with the survey of asking if they feel safer as well. So we're hoping for increase in bike counts, but even if they're the same, we can look at the speeds and see that the corridor is actually safer. The collisions are also one that it's obvious why it's there. We have a big data collection of prior collisions, but we only have, say, maybe a 12 to 18 month period after it's being in place. So that will be an interesting metric to look at afterwards as well.
I'll roll a comment in here because it just pertains to this. Maybe I should save it for comments, but there's, from what I read, there's really changing, like the number of people who walk and bike is really changing because of whether people are doing hybrid work or not. If you work from home, you don't work to work that day, or you don't bike to work that day. There's been a big drop, which is could be a positive thing, or at least not a negative thing. You're not driving. So my plea is just there are other factors besides the street improvement that could affect whether people are biking or walking, and to kind of take that into consideration. And beyond that, and then my other question, I guess, is these 700 comments, are they on anything people want to comment on? Because I know there were a lot of when people came and gave public comment on this during the council meeting. They had a lot of things in addition to this, you know, what about the green elements and whether they just felt nicer and
So
things like that.
they were responses to the survey. So
I
there was a number of questions, and the questions were agree, partially agree,
I see.
strongly disagree. And then also was how to use the corridor now. If you hit a button for bike, you hit a button for ped, hit a button for vehicle. And then at the end, there was a open comment. So the 700 is really kind of guiding us through all of those questions that we want to collect pre-construction.
I see. And then getting additional comments that they want. So, okay, thank you.
I just have a question, and maybe this is for future. So is it possible to get information on how many the so I'm trying to figure out the right way to ask this. So my understanding is that some of it, especially as you're going into the like multi-family dwellings or the apartments, may be in need of seismic retrofit. And would staff be able to collect that data and my question about that is, we're gonna be creating all this infrastructure, even though it's a pilot. But what happens if there may be use changes along the corridor, something gets redeveloped, how that might affect what we're doing. And so I'd love to get, if possible, for staff to be able to collect, how many of those properties are on our list of seismic or in need of seismic retrofit, just so we can get a sense. And I know it's mixed. There's some family, there's some some apartment. But my understanding is that corridor has quite a bit of CSMRA properties. And so I would ask staff too, if you could, when this comes back to CTC, to help us understand when we then, whoever's development comes, how the, entrances and exits might be affected. Would that affect the pedestrian experience? Would they have to build in like the existing? So one of the experiences I have, especially from the shoreline to street right now. But the first half of it, there's so many
Multifamily.
side self-story. Yeah, no, driveways, sorry.
Okay, yes, correct, driveway.
So you can walk and there's a driveway and then a driveway and a driveway. And so that really affects, I feel, the user experience as a pedestrian or a cyclist. You're not feeling safe on California. So I'm just trying to get a better sense of how we may be able to address that as we're making these. So.
A related comment. Do you
I don't know,
want to
it's
make
a
it now or,
question.
oh, it's a question.
Yeah, I
can
mean,
make it
I'd love to get more information if staff could look into that or how staff might address that. Because that's the
Again, so as part of when properties do redevelop, so seismic retrofit aside, when properties do redevelop, staff does do pretty intensive review of the development project and how the circulation is going to work for the project. As part of that, we also look at ensure that site visibility for pets and bikes and vehicles are all taken into account for access to the site. So we would do that as part of the development review process. When a new property would come in for redevelopment. And then how it would fit here is we would see, like, a lot of times, sometimes they'll consolidate. We try to get consolidation of access points as well for redevelopment sites. So if they have multiple driveways, as you've noted, there's a lot of driveways on California because there's a lot of small properties, larger properties with multiple access points. We really try to consolidate that to really reduce the number of conflict points. So we would do that with that effort. And then with this effort, what we did is we didn't want to take any access points away, but we wanted to be sure that the sight lines were appropriate. So as part of that evaluation was, do we have enough at each driveway? What do we need to do? Because we're really changing the configuration. We're not putting the cars right next to the curb anymore. We're pushing them out. And so there may be that site visibility needs to open up again. So we had to remove some access for parking within those sight lines to provide the drivers visibility to bikes and other cars, as well as other cars to the driveway, vehicles sitting in the driveways for bicyclists and pedestrians.
And that will come back to, we'll see a little bit more of this once it comes back into design.
Yeah, what we were trying to do with the performance measures really was a focus on sort of a success of the corridor. What makes it successful? That's why we identified those goals and those specific criteria. Performance metrics and data collection can go on. You can collect data to rule the place. And it can be very intensive for staff in order to collect all this data and to continually report on. So we tried to be focused on sort of with the key data, keep it light as well. So there was a real balance there and not over extend staff or just resources that we do on data collection. So the focus was on the metrics that you saw in your report.
Well, it's great to hear that there's consolidation because I feel like there's just, there's so many access points there. I feel like that has led to, I think, no, I try to avoid any type of running up the because I don't want to get hit. Okay, committee member McLeod, yes.
Just related to that, and I think I'm going into comments now, but just related to that, I also had wondered when I was reading the staff report, if like you said, there are a lot of properties that may change due to earthquake retrofit needs, the change in parking needs, and which impacts what you could do with the bike lanes a lot. So that's another thing I wondered whether that was being taken into account or could be taken in.
So your question regarding to also look at what possible change in parking needs as properties redevelop along this specific corridor?
Yeah, in particular, if it's likely, as the chair said, that a lot of them will be redeveloped if we do an earthquake retrofit program. What's the change in parking needs and how does that, maybe they incorporate more parking on site and there's not as big a parking need, or maybe they don't because of state law and because of whatever, because they can't put it up easily anymore. So how does that affect, how we do the bike, just, if they incorporate more parking there, then maybe we could do better bike lanes in some way, or if not.
Yeah, I see acting city manager, community development director wanted to speak to pieces.
Well, thank you, and thank you for the question. Again, Dawn Cameron, currently acting assistant city manager, community development director. This is a broader question you're bringing on than just California. And it is something I've heard council members bring up at past meetings that they're concerned about. So I guess it's time to put in a plug right now for next Tuesday night's council meeting. We are bringing forward a study session on the council priority for the holistic review of street parking regulations. And that does provide that overview of all the city street parking regulations, but when you see that, you will see that staff in key findings and upcoming challenges brings up the concept that you're bringing up, that we could have changing conditions for our street parking in the future. And particularly could see the supply of street parking be reduced as we look at other potential uses of our right of way, including adding bicycle improvements, wider sidewalks, green street elements, and how that plays off with a kind of reduction in supply with potential increase in demand as we look at new development projects coming in that may propose little to no parking, either consistent with state law or even our precise plans in some cases, really want to focus on not using cars, other means, and therefore working on reducing the amount of parking provided on site. But what does that really mean for what may happen with on-street parking? So we don't spend a lot of time on that in the report. We bring it up, and then you will find that staff is proposing a particular study and approach that if council wants to support it, that we could look into doing, that not just looks at California, but other areas in the city where we could see, you know, particular challenges for on-street parking in the future and what that could look like.
Good to know.
Any other questions? Great. We'll move on to public comment. So would any member of the public joining us virtually or in person like to provide comment on this item? If so, please click the raise hand button in Zoom or approach the lectern. We'll take in-person speakers first. Each speaker will have 3 minutes.
Thanks. Cliff Chambers, resident of Mountain View. I've been a long supporter of this project and I'm finally seeing that the construction will potentially happen this summer. Yay. It's been a long time coming. I've been really happy on how this project has developed. The extension from Showers all the way to Shoreline is major. I really like the vertical treatments that are being evaluated, including Green Street improvements. I think staff has done a wonderful job with outreach and responding to public comments on this. So I think we're really ready to go forward. I'm very happy with the evaluation process that's actually already been implemented. The only thing that I'd like to see a little bit more rigorous evaluation is of the vertical treatments, not only for what might be used to cost effectively use in the final project, but also as we consider corridors like Rangsdorf, what are the lessons learned that we can apply and hopefully not take 10 years from the time the Complete Streets program came about to actual construction of the pilot program. So those lessons learned, I think, in an evaluation process would be really important. I'd like to see a little bit more rigor go into that so we can use that data for future projects. So thank you very much.
Good evening, Serge Bont, resident of Mountain View. So I wanted to tie back to the comment I made during oral comments. One thing you want to make sure is that you know, in Mountain View, we don't close sidewalks for an inordinate amount of time when there is redevelopment. You know, you're going to do counts and surveys and things like this. I can tell you that if you did one on Rangsdorf right now, you would get a very low walking score because there is no walking, right? So that's one thing to keep in mind. You also don't want to change the conditions. So there was a lot of discussions about this PDDs. Should they start during that pilot? You know, I'm not sure you're going to get the benefits to this, but maybe that's going to be proof that maybe it's not a good idea. So, so that would be maybe a good feedback from a PDD program. In terms of the metrics, there is one that I think you should be able to measure. It's a big impediment for pedestrians. That's the constant encroachments on sidewalks, on crosswalks, by cars, by bikes. By car, that's typically because they can do a right on red, but it's really like a lot of times it's like playing that game like Frogger, you know, on a crosswalk where you shouldn't be doing this. And I'm hoping that with the improvements you provide, there will be less encroachments, maybe bike boxes, for instance, so that bikes don't stop in the crosswalk. And you know, hopefully at some point, you know, no rights on red, so that it will limit a big chunk of encroachments, because that limits the vision. That's not safe, but it's really not comfortable because you have to zigzag around cars. Thank you.
Yes, we do. April Webster, I'm going to click to allow you to talk. Please unmute yourself and you have 3 minutes.
Hi, thanks. April Webster. Like Jeff, I am absolutely thrilled that this is moving forward, and that you know, council voted to consider green infrastructure here, and even to for the final project, when the pilot's done, to implement this as a green complete streets project where green infrastructure will be integrated, and, you know, help us as a city meet the ever increasingly more strict requirements for GSI that we have for our license for MRP 3.0. They just, each time that comes around, they make it more strict, which I think is absolutely wonderful. But I wanted to ask a question and talk a bit about the metrics. And I think it's great that we have quantitative metrics. We're looking at performance, but I think there are also some important qualitative metrics that we need to look at, and how we're using this in the ATP, and it's very common as a metric for evaluating active transportation infrastructure. We see it in Caltrans guidelines. It's one of their goals is comfort, and not just comfort, but perception of safety. And I don't think that the performance metrics can accurately capture that. I think we should be a little bit more careful in how we do that. And I thought, you know, in addition to looking at the different types of vertical separation for their cost and maintainability, that in some way there could be a way we could survey people using it to see if there's differences in, you know, the differences that are seen in industry and a larger population, if we also see that in Mountain View. And often, you know, I'll bring this up again, but the interested but concerned, they tend to favor more robust vertical separation. I'm just reading from a DOT document. A majority of people in the US are interested in bicycling in low stress environments. They're likely to skip bicycling altogether unless they have physical separation. And I know we're slowing the traffic down by narrowing lanes, but I think it's still important to look at those different types of vertical separation and understand that. DIB 94 also refers to this on page 22, that you want to maximize horizontal and vertical separation whenever feasible. And those different types of separators do a different job of that. And then finally, they do also in DIB 94 talk about using green options to provide shade and get that comfortable and enjoyable experience. So I'd like to evaluate that somehow if we could. Thank you.
Emil Abraham, I'm going to click to allow you to talk. Please unmute yourself and you'll have 3 minutes.
Hey, how's it going? It's Emil, live on Middlefield. Honestly, I've been watching the progress of this project ever since I moved here. This has been my favorite project to follow, and I'm super excited. Every other roadway project felt very much like we were playing catch up or patching things with Band-Aids, squeezing in like the bare minimum active transportation, like whatever we could do, wherever it's possible. This is the first project to me that feels very, very different and almost like proactive. So my favorite things, like the first is the before and after survey. I don't recall having this for many other projects. I absolutely love being able to participate. So I've shared this survey with everyone I know here. And the other thing I like a lot is the piloting of vertical elements. So it's a great opportunity to collect data so that we can make more informed decisions in the future. So I really hope to see a lot more projects like this where it feels like proactive. Big thanks to all the staff and the council members involved. Thank you very much.
And we have no more public comment.
Great, thank you. All right, I'll bring the item back to the committee for, they have any additional comments they'd like to make. No formal action from our committee is necessary, but if there's anything else to add of your staff.
Thanks. As I said before, I think your metrics are the right ones to have. I appreciate that you will also be looking at the vertical treatments to see which ones can be maintained and what's the other effectiveness. Thank you. I think those are good. I kind of assumed that some of the things members of the public mentioned, like, do people feel comfortable? Well, I think if they do, we'll see more people using it. So I was kind of folding all of those into the other metrics that you have, but people can still provide input, right? On the softer metrics, so to speak, like I felt comfortable. Would they do that via the survey or is it a different survey?
That's really the design of the survey, is to
Okay.
get to that comfort question that April Webster was referring to.
Okay, that's what I thought. So I'm good with what you proposed. Thanks.
Yeah, I'm glad this is going forward and I echo things other previous speakers have said. And I think most of my comments I incorporated into my questions. So thank you.
Great. Yes, big thank you to staff. I think just hearing the level of responsiveness from the community, I think is wonderful. And given it's such a long stretch as well, it's really great to hear such positive feedback from residents on a project so large that I think will transform the corridor, which I'm really excited about. And kind of my question / comment earlier was concerned that we're gonna do all this infrastructure and then we might have to make some changes if some brand new big project comes, right? And I wouldn't want that to kind of impede what I think is really gonna be a project that revolutionizes that whole corridor. So my concern was, you know, knowing that there could be changes, making sure that we can preserve this because as mentioned by Mr. Chambers multiple times, just the length of time it's taken this to come forward. And I wouldn't want any changes to kind of, keep that up. So
Sorry, I do have another comment, because I forgot,
Oh, yeah.
when we were talking about that. I do believe staff, when we have redevelopment, does look at reducing the number of curb cuts. And so that's, great, although I'm not sure we'll see those multifamily units redeveloped because of SB 330. But seismic retrofit is completely different, and I don't think that would change the number of parking spaces or the access or anything. You're just, this is probably a very simplistic way of saying it, sort of shoring up the building as opposed to redeveloping it. So I don't think it would change much of anything, is my understanding.
it's good to know. Yeah. I just know that that could be a heavily impacted area for a lot of. Great. All right. I think that concludes, I think staff has everything they need from us.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you. All right, we'll move on to item 5.3, the Vision Zero Action Plan and Local Road Plan. The staff presentation will be provided by Priyoti Ahmed, Transportation Planner.
Are you share the other way? Luckily, there's no negative. She already talked to Ms. Push it in. So what else does she know? Let's do something. Yeah.
Hello, good evening, CTC members. I am Priyoti Ahmed, Transportation Planner with City of Mountain View. And today I'll be presenting Vision Zero Action Plan and Local Safety Plan Final Report for your review. To provide a bit of background, in 2019, Mountain View City Council adopted Vision Zero policy, which sets the goal of zero fatal collisions by 2030. Vision Zero Action Plan is integrated with Local Road Safety Plan to identify, analyze, and prioritize roadway safety improvements. This integrated plan recommends a new set of projects and policies that will improve safety and save lives. This table shows the key components of the two plans. These two plans have similarities such as setting clear goal and vision, but they differ in approach. Vision Zero tends to focus on severe and fatal collision, also known as KSIs here, at specific locations where Local Road Safety Plan not only identified the same location, but also identifies location with similar land use and roadway factors. Local Road Safety Plan recommendations are infrastructure-based, where Vision Zero has a multidisciplinary approach that includes education, encouragement, enforcement to prevent future severe and fatal collision. The integration of these two plans allowed us to conduct a more holistic crash analysis and develop recommendations that are both infrastructure and non-infrastructure focused. So this timeline shows the period from when the adoption was, when this policy was adopted till where we are today. So today I'll point out the few key milestones from this timeline. December of 2019, Vision Zero policy was adopted, and we started this plan in May of 2020. Based on the systemic analysis feedback, we have identified safety projects in our CIP, and we also expanded the Safe Routes to School program as well as the Crossing Guard program. On March 22, we received feedback on identified countermeasure toolbox and project prioritization criteria. These deliverables were shared with Vision Zero Working Group, BPAC, CTC, and general public. So based on the feedback we have received, we have drafted our recommendations that include infrastructure and non-infrastructure program and policy, and we'll be going over them today. Before we dive into the recommendation, I wanted to update you about the safety corridor. This plan's systemic analysis identified cities' high injury network, which highlights corridors with a high number of severe and fatal collisions. During the development of this plan, AB 43 was signed. CPC defined a safety corridor as a roadway segment within overall roadway network where the highest number of serious injury and fatal collisions occur. After reviewing AB 43, it was determined that the safety corridor definition is consistent with the high injury network defined in this plan. The safety corridor qualifies for additional 5 miles per hour speed reduction from 85th percentile speed. Note El Camino Real and Central Expressway are listed in high injury network, but are not part of safety corridors due to being outside of city's authority. Since the end of the crash analysis period, many of the safety improvements along high injury network have been completed or underway, such as El Camino Real, Shoreline, California Street, El Monte, Middlefield, Miramonte, Cuesta Drive, Amphitheater, and we have multiple intersections that are also have improvements. So now to the recommendations. As I mentioned earlier, the integration of the both plans allowed us to develop recommendations that include infrastructure and non-infrastructure programs and policy. Within the infrastructure part, we have segments and intersections, and non-infrastructure includes programs and policies. The infrastructure improvements are based on identified countermeasure toolbox, that was developed by Federal Highway Administration and other best practices. This toolbox have been reviewed by Vision Zero Working Group, BPAC, CTC, and general public. Some of the countermeasures include protected left turn, class 4 protected bikeways, road diets, and different traffic calming measures. For the infrastructure recommendation segments, we applied this toolbox to scored segments based on project prioritization criteria, and here are some of the highlights. We have Rengstorff Street, which is, we are proposing Rengstorff Green Complete Street study, Ellis Street protected bikeways, Grant Road, high visibility crosswalks, and new bikeways from Martins to El Camino. And for infrastructure recommendation intersection, we followed the same process of identifying the intersections, and some of the key projects include El Camino Real and Castro protected intersection, Middlefield Road and Independence Avenue, that includes various pedestrian and bicycle improvements, Charleston Road and Amphitheater Parkway, again, pedestrian and bicycle related improvements, and Ortega and Latham Street. For the non-infrastructure improvements, these were strategies that were not engineering based. So these included education, enforcement, encouragement, engagement, equity, and evaluation. These strategies were presented in 5 safe system elements that include safe road users, safe vehicles, safe speeds, safe roads, and post-crash care. Within these recommendations, there were a couple of common buckets. So first one being safe routes to school. So through this plan, we will be continuing to provide safe routes to school education to all Mountain View students. We'll be working with school and parents to start in partnership and to encourage them to walk and bike to school. And we'll be also advancing safe routes to school walk audit observation into improvement recommendation. We are currently working on conducting Vision Zero marketing and outreach campaign. We'll be holding community-wide bike, walk, and bike tours, enforcement efforts that focus on behavior associated with fatal and severe injuries, including speeding and driving under influence of drugs or alcohol. And finally, city policy and organizational efforts to support city's Vision Zero policy, such as providing staff training on Vision Zero best practices and reviewing city protocols to improve consistency with Vision Zero. We presented the draft recommendation to BPAC in March, and they supported the overall recommendation and provided additional feedback, including implementing a no right turn on red prohibition at certain locations, reporting of all traffic collision involving pedestrian and bicyclist, tracking and reporting progress updates on implementation of Vision Zero action plan and local road safety plan. We have included all these feedback into our recommendation that we present here today. For the next steps, we are here to take your feedback, and we are planning, based on our conversation today, we are planning to take this as a consent item to council in September. In terms of the plan implementation, as I mentioned earlier, we are working to launch Vision Zero marketing and outreach campaign. We are working with multiple teams to identify funding opportunities for the projects. And we will be holding quarterly Vision Zero working group meeting that is an internal working group to work through some of the non-infrastructure recommendations. With that, the discussion here today is review and recommend the City Council to adopt the Integrated Vision Zero Action Plan and Local Road Safety Plan draft report. With that, I conclude my presentation.
Great, thank you very much. Do committee members have questions? Committee member Mashek.
Thanks. I do have some questions. Given that we just recently talked about the active transportation plan, and now we have these two, I guess I'm wondering, do we have any other bicycle or pedestrian plans? Or is that it?
I believe these two are it, yeah.
And then the active transportation plan.
So,
that we're
yes,
working on.
yeah. that's Brandon reading active transportation plan, and this is Vision Zero action plan and local road safety plan that's in the final report stage.
So how do we prioritize what we do when it comes to bike ped improvements among the three plans?
So this plan, this is the integrated plan. We are looking into improving safety for all modes. That includes motorist, bicyclist, and pedestrian. So our goal kind of going into it was this: we had kind of one major goal is to get to zero, vision zero, and through reducing the collisions among all modes, where and through also the policies for our engagement, we have a other ease policy that gets to achieving that goal. So looking at the prioritization criteria for this specific plan had that very clear, that safety was the first, and then it was equity, and we had kind of a vulnerable road user. So if there was because we saw a lot of severe collision, including bike and ped. So kind of making sure that was reflected. So that's how kind of we went from there.
So if we have a finite amount of money, how do we divide it between the different projects we could be working on?
Yeah, if I can, let me try and answer that question. So the Vision Zero action plan, the road safety plan, we're sort of at the end of the line for the project on identifying as the segments and intersections that you've seen, been identified. As part of the active transportation plan, we're seeing that this starts to feed into the active transportation plan and is evaluated in a holistic manner, not only with these projects, but other projects that we've identified in the bike. I'm going to get this wrong, bike master plan.
Bike transportation
Thank you,
plan,
bike transportation
pedestrian
plan.
master plan.
Pedestrian master plan. I always get those two confused. As well as other projects that we've identified among staff and then we've heard from the community. So really, the active transportation plan we see as the focus of prioritizing all the projects that we've seen, and that was the intent of the kind of holistic. What are everything out there? How do we prioritize that? What are the policies related to that? So that way, staff has some clear criteria and guidance on as new projects come in and existing projects, where do they live in prioritization for staffing resources and funding resources?
Okay, so would these plans be updated?
Yes, so this plan would be updated every 5 years.
Every 5 years. And then we would update the active transportation plan based upon updates to these two. I guess my ultimate question is why do we have 3 plans? Why do we not just have 1 plan and have criteria that it's part of Vision Zero or it's part of the local road safety plan as ranking criteria for what gets funded?
Appreciate the question, and let me see if I can answer this as well. As transportation planner Ahmed was mentioning, number one, yes, the city did adopt a Vision Zero policy. And a policy is a great thing, but we knew when we adopted the policy that it needs to be accompanied by an action plan. And that action plan, as noted, is more than just infrastructure. It is programs, it's policies, and it is looking at the entire transportation network and all the users. It's not just focused on bicycle pedestrians, as noted. Local road safety plan came along after we adopted the Vision Zero policy, and many jurisdictions were. And actually, just so you know, the concept of a local road safety plan came down to us from, I want to say federal and then down to state, to the point of, in order for jurisdiction to qualify for certain grant programs, you must have a local road safety plan. So we've used these particular grant programs in the past. We'd like to use them in the future. So we were required to make sure we adopted one. And But there were so many similarities with the Vision Zero Action Plan. That's when it was decided, and other jurisdictions have done this as well. It should be a combined approach. And one of the main differences, as mentioned, is a Vision Zero plan focuses on where you have the history of collisions, while the local road safety plan was to be a systemic approach that looked at not just where you have collisions, but where you have other areas with similar characteristics. And it really is a menu of countermeasures that can be considered where you have these conditions, which, so one of the key pieces is the toolkit. So it's not meant to be overly prescriptive of exactly what you're gonna do where, but you know, what are all your toolkit pieces to look at? And then you get to, yes, the question of prioritization, which corridors should be focused on first, and that's where you get to the safety corridors, the high injury network. In the middle of that, as you're bringing up, there was definitely a need to redo and update what was called the pedestrian master plan and the bicycle transportation plan, and the desire to think more holistically about active transportation plans, which is why you go with the integrated improvement. And that's where you get to projects that not only are dealing with safety, but as well as improvements we can make to our roadway system that will in general encourage more walking and bicycling, with the goal of more walking and bicycling, not just to make it safer. So yes, we end up now with these two different plans. But we definitely see the Vision Zero Action Plan, Local Road Safety Plan, where it relates to bicycle and pedestrian improvements feeding into the active transportation plan. Please correct me if anything's switched. And it's going to be a key factor in helping to determine priority improvements in terms of the bicycle and pedestrian network. So this is a very valuable data, definitely feeds into it. It also will continue to inform the recommended commitments the city should make towards programs, policies to improve safety. It's one of the key movers and shakers that led to what is now a very robust Safe Routes to School education encouragement program. I really think that this laid a really excellent foundation as we were working on this for enhancing that, as well as now the new marketing campaign that is about to go out. So we're always going to have a situation where there's going to be different lists, and we will have to regularly kind of reconcile how we prioritize projects among these different lists. And some of this prioritization also is going to relate to what are the funding sources and what are we allowed to use the funding on. And in fact, in some cases, it's always been advisable that when you do a priority list, even through the active transportation plan, you don't do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You do more of a tier approach. These are the highest priority ones, the highest tier. And the reason why is you never know where your funding's going to come from, which grants would be most appropriate, where your redevelopment opportunities would come from. So you want to be able to position yourself to look in terms of getting as many of these higher priority projects delivered without trying to be too rigorous that this has to be first, then this, and then that. I don't know if that fully answered your question, but all of this is just, it's not unusual to have different lists based upon what the priorities are you're trying to achieve. And it's through the capital improvement program process where we're trying to bring it all together in terms of which projects we're going to pursue when.
So I appreciate hearing all of that. That was great. I feel like I'm still looking for the big picture of this active transportation plan. And could the active transportation plan identify which projects are part of either the Vision Zero, the combined Vision Zero local road safety plan, and identify those so we know? Okay. We will definitely, number one,
based upon the direction of feedback from council about the active transportation plan, we will be getting together and preparing for bringing some to CTC in September. That starts to really take a look back at what the network would look like, things that we were hearing, as well as what the universal projects would be. And definitely, as you're asking, that we would show which of the projects you're seeing here were also identified in this plan.
Okay. Sort of switching gears a little bit here. Why do we need a marketing plan on the Vision Zero?
So yeah, it's Vision Zero marketing and outreach campaign. As I said, Vision Zero has all these other E's that includes education, encouragement. So our primary goal for this one is to really raise the awareness of like, what is a Vision Zero policy? Why does it matter? And kind of get city, kind of our residents into it, excited. And other campaign messaging will focus on anti-speeding to especially around schools and parks where we see a lot of people walking and a lot of conflicts happening. Those are the areas where we're going to be kind of really doing anti-speeding. And I've been told there's various cool ways we can provide these type of messaging out. So.
Okay, that helps. I had a specific comment, but let me look it up because it's been a while since I wrote it down. On top of page 2, staff report. Oh, the second bullet. Develop 8 emphasis areas to achieve Vision Zero. What does that mean?
Yeah, so after going through the crash analysis and a public outreach process, local road safety plan and Vision Zero both kind of we identify what are the big areas to address in order to get to Vision Zero. What are the big buckets? So number 1 is the high injury network. We want to kind of target the corridors we've identified through high injury network where we are going to recommend projects. Second was I don't know if a second, but it was one of them was pedestrian safety, then bicycle safety, because those the user we see are involved in more severe and fatal crashes. Then there was equity. One of them was near school routes and park routes that we want to kind of start going through identifying different projects. So that was kind of feed into selecting the locations.
Okay. I think that's all I have for now. Thank you.
So good big picture. Let's go for some details. So I was just intrigued when you said there are cool ways you can talk about things like anti-speeding because it always sounds very sort of or something to me. Do you have an example? Or?
Yeah, so Seattle, so there's a Heads Up Boulder that they use in Colorado. I think Seattle used Slow the Flock Down and they had pictures of birds. Seattle's big outdoor community, so I think that really resonated. And I think they were saying the way you would provide, they're able to kind of track of where people travel from and push out these campaigns through either social media and radio channels with those users that are driving through those corridors. And that, feels, that feels kind of very targeted to the audience that we want to kind of speak to in terms of getting them aware of how to reduce speed and the importance of reducing speed.
That gives me more of a picture.
Yeah.
Let's see. So BPAC suggested, I like BPAC's suggestions, and one of them was a recommendation related to no right turn on red, prohibitions at certain locations. And that's one I've heard talked about a lot. And I was wondering whether you had locations picked out or whether that's a future.
Yeah, so we addressed this in 2 ways. First, we added this countermeasure to El Camino and Grant intersection recommendation that's in, I believe, that's in the table. And we also included this in the non-infrastructure recommendation, and we added a policy, a strategy term that says explore processes for implementing no turn on red countermeasure and develop policy for a no turn on red consideration. So we want to kind of know what's the policy for implementing and then develop a policy citywide.
So you have that one identified and then possible more to come with it.
If I may, this can sort of illustrate how the interaction is happening between the plans here and the active transportation plan. You know, we heard that feedback. And so we've been working with our traffic engineering department. We have a meeting scheduled. And our currently the consultant for the ATP is generating information on how several other cities have set up the criteria to select the locations for no right turn around and then the metrics for success. When we get that information back from the consultant, then we're going to work together as a team internally to see what works. And then bring that through the processes, TAC, ATPAC, BPAC, CTC, BPAC, or council. So that is a great example of how her plan is impacting our plan and how we're working internally to get to that from a knowledgeable perspective, looking at best practices that other cities have used.
Imran thinks you handled that. Yeah. Okay, so what exactly does a protected intersection project entail?
Yeah, protected intersection project can have like various features. So it has a setback, which pulls the intersection and kind of provides the visibility for the bicyclist. It has green panes to provide them the space to work, to wait, again, increasing their visibility. It has curb extension to like square out again to kind of increasing the visibility. So it creates a separation from vehicles to bicyclists, as well as it provides that space, increases the visibility. Anything?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. It's more of a set forward for the bicyclist. So, and you can see these in real life here, in Mountain View, at Charleston and Shoreline. So what you do is you keep the stop bar for motor vehicles where it currently is, but then the bicycle lane basically extends forward into the intersection. And then a corner protective island is placed that is at least 6 feet, because that's the length of a bicycle, that is out of the path of the bicyclists that want to turn left and completely out of the path of motorists. And this creates about 15 to 20 feet, really depends on the intersection, of distance between where the bicycle stops and where the motorist stops. And this creates basically a time difference. So when that same light, we'll just use one light, goes green, bicyclists are already ahead in the field of vision of the motorist and already moving and in theory, clearing before the motorist wants to make their right turn. This is very important because when the cyclist and a conventional bike lane are equal next to each other with the motorist, with that light turns green, they both go forward. Well, the motorist can turn right into the cyclist because there isn't distance created there. And then the last thing that the protected intersection does really well is it protects the left. Now you have to make a 2-stage left instead of the motor vehicle merging left, which a lot of cyclists interested but concerned cyclists do not want to merge through multiple lanes of traffic. So with a 2-stage left, they can, like a pedestrian, cross once, there's space for them to wait, it's protected with that corner island, and then go on the next leg. So they have to go on 2 faces of the light. And that's how we do it with infrastructure. You can do it also with like signal heads, if you don't have the space, and you simply give like signal head more green than the motorists.
So that's a good example of what we might repeat out elsewhere where we have the space.
100%. Yeah, and we are doing it in the California Complete Streets project with 6 or 7 or 8, several protected intersections will be tested.
Signalized intersections on California will be protected. There'll be paint in the pilot phase. And then we're also looking at that. Council approved the Castro and El Camino intersection. I can go on.
So we like to talk about this because this is really our bread and butter on all the elements. Staff answered the question perfectly. One element that it also, these protected intersections, you hear these islands that are put out in the intersection at the corners to provide this protection for bicyclists. They also increase the radius for cars to turn. So that provides, and I spoke a little bit about visibility on California Street on these driveways. That really allows the car to make a wider radius turn and provide that visibility. So you're not at a skew angle as you're turning and to see the bicyclist, you're more at a right angle.
It's your bread and butter. What can we do legally to slow speeds on neighborhood streets? Is there none?
Well, we have our neighborhood traffic management program. That's an active program that we're actually, you're going to hear an update through one of the upcoming council connections on all the activity that's been happening on the neighborhood traffic management program in various neighborhoods. So the way that program works, it's really resident driven. And we really allow the residents to really drive that process. They petition the city on, they're finding speeding, which is a common occurrence on these corridors along neighborhood streets, where they've identified a need to address the speeding or to provide some kind of tool that's available in the toolbox in the program to apply to that street. And so it goes through the process. They petition the city, we evaluate to see if it meets the criteria for an NTMP program. That's our acronym for it. And then we reach out to the community. We have a community meeting to identify, here's some possible tools that could apply. If it meets the criteria, we have that community meeting. We just recently had several. And we get their buy-in on the type of tools that could apply. And then again, it's very democratic. We put out postcards to all those that are affected on the corridor to identify, here's the tools that we've heard from the community that they want to implement. Do you agree with these, implementing these tools or not? And then based on that feedback, I forget the exact numbers, but we need to receive a certain amount of responses, and of those responses, we need to receive a minimum amount of other responses. I think I want to say 66% of those on the corridor need to respond. And then of those, 33%, I believe, need to agree to the numbers. And then the city implements the improvements. So some examples are radar feedback signs, or which are really popular speed humps. So we find that those are very effective, and we've just applied those recently on Church. So as a recent example.
That's right.
So you know them.
Yeah. Yeah, and aren't there also like traffic circles and some kind of green infrastructure that narrow streets that are included in, I've looked through the long list of neighborhood traffic management tools. And I think those are like in the very bottom of the toolbox and not used as.
Perhaps, yeah, we provide a whole list of examples that could be applied. And we really focus on the light, easy opportunities to apply these quickly. So that's why those feedback signs and the speed humps really come to the top, because we've implemented them, they're easy to apply and don't really change the configuration. But we are looking at a local street in the Grant neighborhood to, it's a sort of L Street that has 2 access points. And we've received feedback from the community that they really want to close one of the sides. We're implementing that with some temporary measures that you're seeing here tonight on California Street with some flexible posts, some rubber curbs, so that we can pilot this to see how it's going to work. And we've got very high support from the community that really wants to see that. So, but it allows us to implement quickly. So that's why sort of those rise to the top.
Okay, great. So I just had 2 questions. So for the education component, especially regarding our Vision Zero plan and the Safe Routes to School, is there outreach to the community that's near the school? So I think what I've seen is a lot of kind of what I'd call like opt-in, like we have a community meeting, please come. Or if your children goes to a school, then you're getting that information. Are there ways to, or is any of this marketing and outreach going to be for those that are in the surrounding areas on education? Because
Yeah, I know. So, we are planning to launch this. So currently we are like developing the messages and like figuring out all the methodology and whatnot, but we want to launch it during back to school time. So back to school time for Safe Routes, we go to every school, they have an ice cream social, kind of orientation. So we go with our presence. And this time we were gonna take Vision Zero messaging. So we will be kind of meeting people where they already are. And also school drop off pickup is kind of a whole thing on its own. And we see a lot of bad behaviors around it. And I think reminding folks about Vision Zero and talking about anti-speeding could be very valuable. So that's how we are kind of thinking about launching it. We also will have focus groups that we are currently recruiting parents to participate in. That could be also neighborhood specific. I think the PM is thinking more about neighborhood specific, so we're trying to reach out to parents in specific schools too.
So I guess my question is more, how are we educating those who are not parents?
I see.
Because I think, so on my way to this meeting, for example, I saw that somebody in my neighborhood put up a little sign that's like, please don't speed, kids that play. They had put one up in my neighborhood, right? And so, which, I appreciate, because I do feel like people speed in my neighborhood. I think everyone thinks that when the neighborhood they live, but, so I don't know what education we're doing for those who don't. But might live in a neighborhood where they're right next to a park or a school where they need to adhere to. A lot of people do the rolling stops, right?
Right.
So.
Yeah, so we'll be doing the yard signs around the schools. We will be doing some like farmers market type of pop-ups. General public outreach will happen through the campaign, and there will be social media messaging targeting to different groups. We have a radio station that we use to kind of provide those campaigns. So a general outreach specific will happen, and I working in Mountain View, I know yard signs are quite effective, so I think we will kind of lean into some of those strategy here as well.
Has there been any direct interaction with like neighborhood associations?
We are reaching out to them to kind of see what type of what type of strategy works for them to kind of start building that relationship.
Okay, great, thanks. And then for figure 1, it's noted that these conflict points are from 2014, 2019. But obviously a lot has changed since then. So do we have any more like recent data? Are we seeing the same conflict points as we were from the 2014 to 2019 period, or has that changed at all?
We haven't done this detailed analysis in 2019. We have looked at collision in a holistic number, like total collision, which is slowly going up, but we haven't looked into specific this level of analysis.
Yes.
The ATP has.
Okay, yes. So will council in some form be able to get kind of updated information? Because I feel, I'd love to know if like trends have changed or not, or if some remaining same as they were from this time period.
Yes, we can do that. Currently the existing conditions report is on the website for the active transportation plan.
So those are updated, so we can so we can assume the data of the conflict points from the active transportation plan. So we can look at this figure from 2014 to 2019 with this plan, but know that your plan has the updated figures.
Yes.
Okay, all right, got it. Okay, thank you. So would we update this plan's information since the active transportation plan has it, or?
Are you talking about just updating the map in terms of showing the conflict points? We can take a look and see if any verbally here, yeah, like if it's just updating a map, I think we'll be able to accommodate that.
I don't know. I would think that it's great that we have it, and so I was kind of getting confused. So thank you very much, because I thought, did we update it? Did we talk about this last week? I don't know. But okay, that would be, I think,
great to do.
Okay.
All right, anyone else have any?
I guess I have
Yes.
another one.
Oh, okay.
So, in the actual plan itself and sometimes in the staff report, it says the recommended improvements. And are those ones that will be evaluated? Like, there's some here that say diverters, and that seems to be a hot topic in the community when diverters are proposed. So, are these recommended that we're gonna study and get input on before we finalize it? Okay.
Yes. These are kind of
They're
a
not
very high
passive.
level, we kind of threw everything on the pot and then we'll like go through the analysis. There are gonna be engineering analysis, feasibility analysis done to come up with the final location specific countermeasures.
Okay, so I appreciate your comment about and the data. And while it would be good to update the map, to me, what's also important is updating then the projects, because if something is no longer a crash location, I would think we would want to update the plan, the whole plan, and not just the map. Because then the map would be out of sync with the projects that you have listed.
So we, in the memo, we do have current projects that are on the works and being funded. So that's not part of the recommendation. We already said kind of, these are Hydro Network and we already know plans like California Street, El Camino that already been going on. So these are really looking at where there are no projects have been identified or they have been identified in some other plan. We're pulling it here to make it, not repetitive, like centralizing it. So these plans are based on locations where we don't have currently ongoing things.
The plans listed in the actual plan itself.
Recommendations, yes.
Right, so, but what if this map has changed so much that those are no longer areas we should focus on? There's other higher priorities. How, when would we update that?
I mean, Dawn, if you want to respond to
I'm
this.
confused.
No, thank you.
Yeah.
I really think, and thank you for really continuing to ask the question. And I think I wanted to just comment that I think the question that's being asked, it needs to. This is what I understand the questions that's being asked. The data that we've worked from for this and what the maps that show the intersections, the high injury network corridors and so on, is collision data that went through 2019, as I recall. So it's 5 years later. Yes, we've been through COVID, which made a lot of changes to travel patterns. Things are bouncing back. So have we been able to, I know also just to be aware that the information on collision data isn't immediate to us. We usually work with Switters or from the Berkeley.
Yeah, Switters,
site,
Tim's and
and that can
Switters.
be about from 18 months ago,
Yes,
as
2
I
years.
recall. So we can look at the collisions that have occurred since 2019 till about 18 months ago to confirm, are these the same intersections and roadway segments are continuing to see where the collisions are currently occurring, or have any new ones popped up? And I believe that's what you're asking for, to make sure that the list of locations identified here are still the ones that we should still be focused on. So is this something staff has been able to look at, is the more recent collision history?
We haven't looked at the most recent collision history to this detail of like location specific detail.
Okay, all righty. So what is the pot? Sorry, I have been a little bit out of the loop, as you know, for the last.
Yes,
couple of months,
you
so-
have been.
And I do want to make sure your questions get answered, because we are aiming to come back in the fall for council to adopt this, and it's not, a one-time thing. It does need to be updated on a regular basis. So do we think there's an opportunity to do some of this analysis over the summer before we to just confirm? I mean, right now our suspicions are, I mean, what we've identified as high entry network continues to be where we see most of the collisions. It could be more specific intersections where we could see if there's any significant changes in where the collisions are occurring.
Sure. Brandon just let me know that he has very detailed data as part of ATP, so we can definitely compare to 22. So we can compare and see if there is any significant change, and we'll recommend the latest one.
So I kind of have a follow-up question on that, but maybe you're
Yeah, go
not.
ahead.
So if you get different, different injuries, let's say in the last 5 years from what was there before, maybe some of them are similar and some of them are different. Unless something significant has changed, I would think that would just be additional information. I would think I wouldn't look back at the ones that happened 20 years ago and say, well, no one will ever be hit. Someone was hit there 20 years ago, but no one will ever be hit there again, because we don't get somebody hit, hopefully, like every week. It's cumulative data unless we've made, is what I'm thinking, and you can tell me how wrong I am. Unless we've made a significant change in that place, then if we've made an improvement, I would hope there would be fewer crashes and maybe we don't have to reconsider it. But if we haven't made any changes, I would think that's, even though it's old data, it's still useful. Is this wrong?
No, you're not. And in fact, it's one of the reasons we make sure we look at least 10 years back, because we're very fortunate that we don't have a locations like Constant, which we don't want to see. But in order to see where there might be a history, we do want to look back 10 years at least. So we would not move away from the previous locations as much as making sure there are no new locations to be added, to be considered. But the other piece is it comes back to the countermeasures that might be applied when it's time. So you don't want to just know the quantity of collisions, you want to know the type of collision. And because that can help inform the review of the intersection in terms of which types of countermeasures would be most appropriate and could best make it a safer intersection. So that's another reason to kind of look at what's happened between 2019 and 2022 to see, in terms of the change in travel patterns that have occurred, has that also affected the types of collisions we may be seeing, or development went in and significantly increased the traffic volumes through that intersection, or hopefully more bikes and peds going through the intersection, and how does that do things, that type of thing. But I think back to the original purpose of the question, staff will take a look at it, and if the data is still comparable to what we had before, this is what you'd see coming to council in the fall for approval of this plan. But if some new information has popped up, we'll be sure to add that in before it's brought to council.
Thank you. All right, and then apologies. So this plan is for 5 years. I just would it be, appreciate that the timeline is added. It's there, and then I think the status is also listed. Is staff at a place where we would know just really kind of next definition for those that are underway when they might be completed, or is that kind of too in the weeds on that? Like, we would just, when it gets updated in 5 years, we'll be told when it was completed.
We can provide an interim update if that's,
I was just curious, because I think we've been, council's been getting varied information in terms of when they, and just thinking about the CIP and other things, and though I didn't get a chance to see it because I was on leave, well, be in the meeting, I did look at it. It's helpful to know when they're
Okay, great. Thank you. Any other questions? All right, then we can bring it to public comment. Would any member of the public joining us virtually or in person like to provide comment on this item? If so, please click the raise hand button in Zoom or approach the lectern. We'll take in-person speakers first. Each speaker will have 3 minutes. Still Serge?
Yeah, I'm still Serge Bond, still awake, and then still a Mountain View resident. So I wanted to touch on two things. I mean, one is the no right on reds or no turn on reds. I don't know, which is a better approach, I think. I wanted to bring up to your attention that there are some signs like this in Mountain View already. You know, there is one from, I think, Hope Street to prevent a turn onto Evelyn by the transit center. There is one out of all places not to avoid a turn onto Shoreline by the fire station there, near the amphitheater. I suspect it's because there is a bike treatment, so there is kind of a bike box and a light, and obviously, you know, in these cases, you don't want right on red. And there is one already on California to prevent a right on red onto the new developments that's across the former mill pad. That's semi-private street. I'm not sure, you know, it's a CC street, but there is one there. I'm not aware of any council meetings or BPAC meetings around them, you know, to establish them. They just appeared. So I don't know why we need to do a complex policy. I think we should do it every chance we get. And you mentioned some improvements for bikes, you know, with bike boxes or things like this. That should be, you know, part of it, because the only way a bike box will work is if you prevent the right on red. Otherwise, you know, people will be going on the bike box. And I think it's a big improvement there. I also wanted to touch on the discussion on the collision data. To me, it's very additive. So I live on a high injury, on a transit safety corridor on El Monte. We had a death there, and it was at this time, you know, almost like 10 years ago now. That person is still no longer with us, you know, so that's not like she can be wiped away, or, you know, the conditions have not really improved. There's a long running, you know, set of projects that have been delayed a few times, none of our fault. So, you know, it has to be additive, because projects take a very long time in Mountain View, and hopefully we'll do it faster, but we have to take this into account. So it's possible that there are new locations that may occur, maybe on ETR5, and then they should be added, and maybe we'll get more transit, you know, corridors, but we can't just give up on people who have been injured or passed away just because we have, you know, new data. So thank you.
Thank you. And I don't see any other members of the public here in person. So do we have any virtually?
We have no hands raised.
Seriously? Are there any members of the public still virtually?
There are 4.
Okay, but nobody has a comment on this. Okay, so we'll close public comments, and we will have the committee provide our comments. It's number 6.
Oh, wow.
Sorry, I'm the
You're the chair.
vice chair
I see.
for a few minutes.
I don't really, you know, most of my comments were reflected in my questions. I guess the only additional thing that I was thinking while we were talking is that some of the things we're talking about for safety, like curb extensions and the neighborhood traffic management program, can also be opportunities to provide green improvements. So I'm hoping there's some overlap, you know, when we're doing the project for safety reasons, we can also do it for reasons, you know, for other reasons to, you know, make the street cooler or more pleasant to walk on, and that we can kind of do both of those goals. Keep that in mind. I think that was yeah, I think that's what I That was my only remaining comment.
Okay, thank you. So let's see my comments. I want to clarify what I was saying about updating the data and the information in the map. I agree that older data is still useful. What I was thinking is we might have changed an intersection and made improvements to it. And now if the more recent data says it's a much safer intersection, that would change potentially our prioritization because it's no longer as dangerous as it used to be. Not that past information is useless. Fortunately, Mr. Launch left. I do support using no right turn on red. I think I find them very helpful because I tend to be a rule follower. I'm gonna stop at the stoplight, I'm gonna stop at the stop sign. I feel like sometimes people in back of me are anxious to go. And I don't feel necessarily safe turning right. So having that no right turn on red is really helpful. I really appreciate the one on, is it Hope and Evelyn? Yeah, that's the way I often go home from council meetings. So I do think those are useful and we should consider those in more places. I want to get back to my line of questioning about how these plans all fit together. And I guess, I'm thinking, and feel free to tell me that this is not at all what you had in mind or why it won't work. But I was thinking, we have this active transportation plan. And as we discussed at the last council meeting, we want the big picture of what it looks like. And for me, what that big picture looks like is because we can't make every single road a complete street, there's not the physical room for that. That we have some optimized for bicyclists, some for pedestrians, and some for vehicles. Now, that doesn't mean the others can't use them, but these are the ones we're really going to focus on, similar to the Safe Routes to School, where we have a map. Here are the main routes that bicyclists can use that we have improved, that they should feel safe on, that it's optimized for bicyclists. And yes, you can go other places, we're not going to prevent that. But the same thing for pedestrians, the same thing for vehicles. But then we have criteria that says, okay, when we're planning, or sorry, not criteria, but well, I guess it is, is it even feasible to do those routes for those different modes of transportation? Because if it's not, we should look at an alternative route that somebody could take. But then we layer into it things like which are the intersections or other areas that are part of the high entry network or part of the Vision Zero or the local road safety plan. And those should have higher priority in my mind than areas that are not part of that network that we've defined that are the best ways to get around town if you're a bike, if you're a pedestrian, or if you're a vehicle. And is that what we're thinking? Or are they disconnected more than that? Like, are these two plans for now an integrated plan, are they more disconnected than what I was describing?
I don't believe they're disconnected. I think the way Dawn described it, that the recommendation will feed into ATP as ATP is going through its own processes. So these list of projects, you will see part of their overall location or improvements plan. I don't know what you're calling that, but there will be a connection that is made between these, two separate plans. But yeah, I do like the fact that, the way you laid out of like different modes and you have like different ways of screening it. So I think we are heading toward that as this plan kind of gets adopted and those recommendation will feed into ATP.
Okay, will we see the ATP, the next or will it come to council before this comes to council?
I believe so. So the CTC will be seeing the active transportation plan in September. I think we were looking to bring the Vision Zero Action Plan, Local Road Safety Plan to council. What was looking at the date?
September 9th.
September. So it'll be very close. I think I'm understanding some elements of your, because we heard, this is some good feedback tonight that speaks to the ATP. Because what we have, the information that we have from the Business Zero Action Plan was mentioned, was going to feed into the active transportation. We're hanging this this theme of knowing where the project came from. And so we're going to start developing a strategy to bring to you in September at the CTC around the active transportation. We still need to convene and figure out, the next steps. But we heard a lot of feedback at the council meeting as well as tonight. And that'll be part of the conversation that we have with CTC on the various elements. It's not only seeing the network as a big picture and how it all fits together, but also on elements that are specific to the different plans and where the plans come from. So you can have a better idea of where does this project fit? Where did it come from? And how is it prioritized rather than not knowing where the basis was? Because then I think that's what you're leading to is there's some elements of certain plans that should be prioritized higher.
Yeah, what I'm concerned about is having just a list of projects with a prioritization when I don't know how they all fit together. Like when I look at, let's see, I guess it was in the action plan, and it has lines and they're all over the city, but they're not connected.
Are you talking about Safe Routes to School?
No, in the actual
for
plan
different
itself.
projects.
Yeah, and, I think I'm not sure I want to do projects that don't further the active transportation plan as the highest priority. I really want this to feed into the active transportation plan and those projects to be higher priority than a project that's not connected at all, not on a main route that not many people take. So that we at least have the base of kind of like the safe routes to school, but for bicyclists, pedestrians, and vehicles.
Can I ask a question about your comment?
Well, sure.
So it seems like there may be I generally agree with everything you're saying. I am looking forward to the active transportation plan as being sets of networks that prioritize different modes. But wouldn't you sometimes find, like in the high injury, if a place that has a high injury probably shouldn't be your safe route to school or your major biking. I mean, when I bike, I don't go on any of the roads that we're improving. I never bike on El Camino Real. I never bike on California Street. And I used to go down there a lot because my kids went to school down there. I went down Latham and I go in on the neighborhood streets. And when I see safe routes to school, they mostly, I'm happy to see that they're not on El Camino. They are on those, so I'm thinking that where there are high injuries and where we're recommending that the networks that people bike on and the networks that people walk on are maybe different places. Hopefully there's very little overlap because I want people biking, walking in high injury places. And then there's your question of priority. Do we improve the biking network, the walking network, or the high injury places? Which may be three distinct places.
So I guess I was thinking that if the best route happens to include something that is a high entry.
But I hope it doesn't. That's
Well,
what I
no,
would
that
think
you
you try
fix
to
that.
avoid. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, ASAP, so that is the best route. I would not want to define the routes, and maybe they change over time. Because we want to avoid them until we can correct them. But maybe that is ultimately the best route to take, because it's the shortest, it's the safest, it's the most efficient or something. That makes it the best route to go, but not if it's unsafe. Because, you know, I think safety is.
I only bike on boulevards with trees because I won't bike and with not a lot of cars. So I was never. So for me, that's what a bicycle route is. I hope that there's some emphasis on that because I think that I'm not the only person. And that's also what I see in the safe routes to school. They often are.
Yeah.
in
Yeah. Okay. So, let me see if I had any comments. I think I've got all my comments in. Unfortunately, Chair Kamei is not back yet. It'd be great to get her comments. Could we maybe, hold this until she comes back to finish it and do a couple of other items on the agenda?
Sure, we can, there's a couple options. We can just take a,
Or we can take a break.
because it has been since 6:30 since we started.
Or if they're council staff or committee reports.
Yeah, and or we can,
Alright.
we can keep going with, come back to this, provide the next item, which I think was the committee, the staff updates. If I remember it on the agenda. Yeah, after this is the, committee and staff announcements and updates. Staff had one, we can provide one.
Yeah, why don't we do that? Because I really do.
Absolutely.
Sorry for the change.
We're counting on an action for this item, so it is the chair.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so
We'll put this on pause.
put this on pause, yep, and we will move on to item 6.1. Which is staff comments.
Names.
Oh.
Robert can get your name.
Sorry, we sort of threw this all out of.
We can, we'll just be patient for a minute here while we get up to plug in first.
That's what we want.
The first one on our list is an update. There was no report on this. This is just a verbal update with the presentation regarding the two grade separation projects, which is at the Transit Center and at Red Store. Joey, can you take it away?
Thank you. Good evening, committee members and chair is missing. My name is Joy Houghton, Senior Civil Engineer in Public Works, and I'm here tonight to provide updates on the city's two grade separation projects at Castro Street and Ringstorff Avenue. Thank you, Robert. Let me begin with a brief update on the most recent council direction on the grade separation projects. As you may recall, the city received 65% design plans for Castro in June 2023, and the cost estimate based on the 65% design in September 2023, which triggered a need for value engineering options. In November of 2023, staff presented to the Council Transportation Committee an update on the Castro Street project, including recommendation to reduce the project scope by deferring elements of the project outside the Caltrain right of way that the city would then deliver in the future as separate projects. The elements recommended to be deferred included the Moffett Boulevard improvements, the Evelyn Avenue realignment or the S curve, the Evelyn Avenue ramp that connects to Shoreline Boulevard,
and the multi-use path on the south side of Evelyn, connecting the west side of Shoreline and Franklin Street. And earlier this year in January, staff provided updates and status on the 2 grade separation projects to City Council and recommended to prioritize one of the projects as the city does not have the funding resources to continue both through construction. As mentioned, staff presented information on the 2 projects, including status, benefits, and costs to City Council due to a limited funding sources and a very significant funding shortfall for the Castro Street project. Staff recommended to prioritize the Ringstorff Avenue grade separation project. Council supported this recommendation given the following. We have an interim solution for Castro Street that doesn't exist for Ringstorff. Ringstorff is also more challenging to pedestrians and bicyclists compared to Castro. And prioritizing Ringstorff means that the city would focus our funding resources, including the city's share of the Measure B funds, towards Ringstorff, and which results in reducing the funding shortfall to approximately 31 million. As the project has NEPA clearance, there are federal grant opportunities Ringstorff can pursue, and the project would be more competitive with a reduced funding shortfall. What does the prioritization mean to the 2 projects? For Ringstorff, it means completing the final design and right-of-way acquisition, also considering value engineering options to further reduce the funding shortfall, and constructing the grade separation upon completion of the final design and right-of-way acquisition phase. For Castro, it means completing the final design of the undercrossings, constructing the city utility relocation project to prepare the city utilities for the future undercrossings, obtaining NEPA clearance to be eligible for federal funding, implementing interim improvements, which I'll share on the next slide, and constructing the undercrossings when funding becomes available. One factor that helped council prioritize Ringstorff is the proposed interim solution for Castro Street, with an unknown timeline for the construction of the undercrossings. Staff recommendation included the interim improvements to the Castro, Moffett, and Central Expressway intersection. The improvements would permanently close the rail crossing to vehicles while retaining the existing at-grade rail crossing for bikes and pets, and convert the Evelyn Avenue at Castro for westbound traffic only with bike accommodations. The improvements would reduce vehicle conflicts for bikes and pets and allow elimination of the railroad signal preemption for Central Expressway and reducing the bike ped wait times to cross Central. Continuing with updates for Castro, again, City Council directed staff to prioritize Ringstorff in January 2024. And in May, the project was assigned a new Caltrain project manager since the departure of the previous one in March. And this month, we are continuing to progress the design from 65% to 95%, while also working on the concepts for the interim improvements. And later this year, in December, staff will return to City Council to provide updated information. Moving on to Ringstorff. Again, in January, council directed staff to prioritize Ringstorff. Also in January, Caltrain released the request for proposals for the construction manager, general contractor, or CMGC for the project. And as a reminder, this is a Caltrain approved project delivery method in which a general contractor collaborates with the project design team to provide input on construction methods during the design phase. In March of 2024, the final design was kicked off with AECOM as the design consultant. And more recently, last month, AECOM submitted an alternative construction method analysis, providing a feasibility review of the box jacking method. Staff is evaluating this report to determine if this could be a cost-effective method for constructing the structure for the rail. Also in May, the governor's May budget revision was released, which affects an awarded grant to the city, and more on that later. And in May, I'm happy to report that the city, along with Caltrain and VTA, submitted a grant application for the Federal Railroad Administration Consolidated Rail Infrastructure and Safety Improvements Program. And for next steps, we are anticipating approval of the CMGC contract in August, and we'll be onboarding the CMGC in September prior to the completion of the 65% design submittal expected in December. And also in December, we will be returning to City Council with updated information on the 2 Great Step projects. And as mentioned, the governor's May budget revision was released on May 10th and proposed to eliminate the funding for the Cycle 6 Transit and Intercity Rail Capital Program, or TIRCIP, which is approximately $350 million of statewide program funds. This includes the $20 million grant awarded to the city towards construction of the Ringstorff Avenue Grade Separation Project. Elimination of the program increases the project funding shortfall by $20 million and causes delay in construction, which also then results in a significant increase in cost and loss of federal funding opportunities to close the funding gap. Don't worry, well, for now, staff has been actively communicating with Senator Beckers and Assemblyman Berman's staff and coordinating with Caltrain, VTA, and the cities of Burlingame and Palo Alto to help advocate for preserving the funding by requesting to delay disbursement rather than eliminating the program funds. And that concludes my updates for tonight.
Great. Thank you. So I think since it's just an update, we'll receive it. If there's any questions.
Great.
Okay.
That's where we're at right now.
Perfect. Great. Thank you. Thank you. Great timeline. Thank you for the update. Much appreciated. Are there any other staff comments for 6.1? Okay. And apologies, we'll move back. I think we're just gonna rewind very quickly to 5.3, which is our Vision Zero Action Plan and Local Road Safety Plan. And I saw on Zoom that my colleagues made their comments, so I'll add my comments because I do know that this actually requires a review and recommendation to the full council. So my recommendations or my comments are the outreach, the engagement and education component are the 2 of the 7 E's that really strike me because I'd really like to see behavior changes, not just for those who would be like using our hopefully biking and walking, but those who are not, and to understand, get a more general understanding, I think, of the rules of the road. And I'd like that outreach to be, I know we have our quarterly newsletter that goes out from the city, forget what that's called right now. But I'd also like to see as these changes go forward, you know, if you're within the 700 feet radius of a school to get that engagement. I know sometimes we do those noticings that'd be really important for those maybe who are not within the school system. I also see an opportunity with the neighborhood associations and then our civic leadership academies. Really like them to both academies to learn about what we're trying to do. I think that really affects the quality of life. So those would be my comments. Then obviously the one I made earlier about just stating the data, you know, though it may not change, if we have the data, we paid for that information from our consultant and gathered it, might as well put it in. And I think lastly, hearing some of the comments of my colleagues, if at some point CTC could get, and I don't know if it's through this Vision Zero Action Plan and local road safety, or maybe like an offline, is maybe the timeline of all the plans. And something that council's been getting is sometimes we've been seeing, okay, this is the timeline for this plan and this kind of this graph chart of all the different plans and their timelines. And I know, especially since all of them are 5 years, just kind of visually be able to see that representation, I think would be helpful. Some of the plans talk to each other, but as was mentioned, they need to be independent, and I think getting a little bit, of a graph, at least would help visual that way, because I know we also have our bike ped plan, we have our ATP coming up. But also knowing that at any time, a resident or community member could give input, right? So, leaving that door open. So those are my comments. Do colleagues have anything else they'd like to add?
No, but we can make a motion.
Okay, great.
Make a motion?
Yes, please.
I would like to recommend that, the city council adopt the integrated Vision Zero action plan and local road safety plan that, draft report has been presented tonight.
So I would recommend we amend that motion to include the part about and updating it before it goes to council, taking a look at the more recent data.
Sure.
If there is any updates to be made.
So you're making, are you seconding with that?
I will second with that addition.
Great, thank you. So we have a motion by committee member Hicks with a second by committee member Matachek. We'll take a vote. So all those in favor? All right, that is unanimous. Thank you very much to staff. So we've done item 6.1, so we'll move on to item 6.2, our committee comments. Do any member committee have comments or reports to share?
Yes, so I do have a question. Mr. Bond brought up earlier this evening about Leland and Rainstorm and the sidewalk issue. And I feel like we also received an email from someone. Yes. I don't know if staff could provide us with an update on how that was being addressed. I don't know that I've seen a response to that person yet, but is there a way to update that person as well as Mr. Bond on what we might be able to do or what is being done to address that sidewalk issue?
Yeah, so I think I also recall there was we received a lot of public input and inquiries regarding just sidewalks in general, and it's overlapping with the El Camino Real project, which, Caltrans is controlling because they are closing or they're excavating out sidewalk areas, curb ramps to do the ramp reconstruction in the middle of some of our projects as well as development projects. So we have it on our list to get back to those residents. We can add thank you, Mr. Bont, to the update on where that is, because if I recall that Mr. Bont also reached out to us, I want to say on Friday about that location, but so we're aware of the comments. We're going to provide responses.
Okay.
And we'll include them with that Rainstorm Latham intersection as well.
Thank you. And if you could include us, so
Sure.
we know. that'd be great.
I actually have an additional question on that. I was just gonna email Kimber and ask her to take care of it, but this is better. Is this more of in terms of the project taking longer that Mr. Bond brought up tonight and the sidewalk being unavailable for longer? Is it more of a updating people on information question or a policy question? Because I think he was asking for some way that there could be a sidewalk provided, like a wooden plank or something.
So it may be both. I think he is asking about, is there a plan? It's been closed for a while.
An
Is there a plan?
alternative.
And I don't have the details right now, but we'll absolutely evaluate that and identify a response for Shabbat. But as a practice, we do have not only city projects, but development projects follow a practice of about a 1-week rule. Where if you're gonna close the sidewalk for excavation or utility work that you need, to keep it closed for about a week. Again, there's certain exceptions to that rule. And if they can't abide by it, we try to be sure to implement a detour plan or alternative routing plan for pedestrians so that way they can get around it. But again, the specifics of this location, we'll get back, we'll identify if the reasoning behind it and whether we missed it or there's a special circumstances related to this one. But I know that they have been actively working at one of these locations that I think Mr. Bont brought up. And as recently as Friday poured some sidewalks. So and I'm not sure if it's matching up where we'll get. But as a practice, we do try to make sure that the sidewalks aren't closed for a long period of time. We put that in our permits for developers. We put that in contract documents for the city projects. But more information to come on the specifics of this location.
Thank you. Great, thank you. All right, any more comments?
All right. Would any member of the public joining us virtually or in person like to provide comment on this item? If so, please click the raise hand button in Zoom or approach the lectern. We'll take in-person speakers first. If there are any, and I'm not seeing any. Is there anyone virtually? No. Okay, great, thank you. So we'll move on to item 7, adjournment at 10:08 p.m. Thank you very much.